Hey guys, it's Romania Black. This is not going to be a mini recap, don't worry. But, so, we're on episode 14 of season 4 of Attack on Titan. This is not going to be a mini recap, but I took a solid week off since episode 13. I recorded episode 13 on a Thursday. I've been watching ahead. I've been trying to stay away from spoilers, and everybody's been really good about not spoiling me. And episode 13 happened, and my brain just shut down. So I was going to take a couple days off, and then I took a couple days off, and then I was going to record, and then I wasn't feeling good, and so then I took another day off, and then I was going to record, and I just couldn't, my brain was like, no, tonight is not the night for Attack on Titan. So I watched Sasaki to Miyano instead. So I did that instead. It was a fun time. But now I've gone back and rewatched episode 12 and 13, and I'm like, no, I'm ready. And I've got lots of comments. Episode 12 and 10 are out on Patreon, YouTube, so I'm really not that far ahead anymore. I need to get farther ahead because I've got to do the recap. But you guys are all pretty much caught up to me at this point. But yeah, so I've got lots of notes because y'all had lots of comments about episodes 10 and 12, surprising no one. Those were great episodes, but I'm going to read a few of them before we start, and then I want to talk about this, okay? So just some quick side notes before I get into this mess. I'm going to explain this mess in a minute. Ideophagus said, I hope I said that right, Ideophagus said that Levi was like, oh, it's a giant tree for monkey. I was like, oh, putting Zeke in the forest of the trees. He's a monkey, it's a tree. Got it. Maya B noted, this is freaking cool. Maya B noted on Patreon that Erwin and Levi's VA have a radio show, and so do Aaron and Connie's VAs. They have radio shows in Japan. What? I'm obviously staying off of any media regarding Attack on Titan right now. I'm not on social media. If things get sent to me, it's either in the Discord or through Twitter. People will send me like a picture and tag me in it. That's not spoilery. But that's my only thing. But I was like, after I get done with this series, I'm like, oh, I'm definitely going to go look up. Because the fact that Erwin and Levi's VA have a radio show, all the AUs, like what are there fics of this? I love it. Yeah. And then getting back to actual things related to Attack on Titan, Sasha Purvis, I'm going to talk about you and Christopher Peterson after the reaction for further discussion. But I do want to note that, yeah, the whole thing about devote your hearts in the last episode, man, it takes on a whole new context, right? I was thinking about that today, rewatching episode 13. I was like, man, the whole devote your heart Sasageo, doesn't it seem nostalgic back in season 2's OP when we were all singing it? It was like a little chant. It was all good times. And now it's about nationalism and possible terrorism, and it's not fun anymore. Isayama's like, that big military song that you thought was really heartwarming, yeah, I'm going to take it and twist it because that's just the way I do things. Yeah, I definitely noted that it takes on a whole new meaning. And it ties back to that whole thing that anything can be angelic or demonic as long as people believe in it, right? So we can take this saying that seems so wholesome and good times, and we can make it into something absolutely different as long as people believe in that message. And I wanted to note that there was talk amongst the people in the comments about, how would Erwin think about all of this, about Sasageo being put into this context? And that's such a what if. Such a can of worms. Like, I feel like the whole debate with Serum Bowl and whether or not Erwin would have been the chosen one for the serum or not, like, you could open up a whole what if alternate universe. And I hope somebody's wrote that because I'd like to read it, because that would be interesting to see, like, you could have a whole podcast series about what would it be like. Maybe I'll do that one day. I'll just be like, what would Attack on Titan be like if Erwin had lived instead of Armin? Maybe when, years down the road when I get bored and I'm like, oh, I wish I could go back to Attack on Titan, I'll do that. But I also want to note that thank you all, first and foremost, thank you all so much, because I was really nervous with episode 10 coming on YouTube, because I'll be honest, I will be the first to admit I had shipper goggles on, and I commented on several comments being like, I had shipper goggles because I like Eren his story as a ship. And now that we see the timeline, it doesn't quite make sense for Eren to be the dad. I get it now. I just didn't, in watching the episode for the first time, I didn't have the right context. I wasn't in the right frame of mind. Shipper goggles were on, and I was like, nope, baby daddy, we're good. And so I have to thank you all for being kind, because as soon as episode 10 came on YouTube, I was like, people are going to rip me apart. And you didn't. So thank you. But also thank you, Sagnorm, because you point out in your comment, you're like, where you're at watching this series mentally is where you should be. Isayama is putting these things out there for you to know. And I was like, that made me feel better, because it's weird. You watch an episode and then I immediately sit down and talk about it. and I don't really process it. And then by the time I record the next episode, I've processed it. And so I'm like, man, that was dumb. Why'd I say that? And so sometimes I doubt myself and I feel like maybe I'm dumb. Maybe I'm not thinking things through right. But then I realize the context that most of you commenting have watched ahead. So you have a little bit more knowledge than I do about what's going on. So I'm envious, but I'll get there. So it'll be all right. But thank you, Sagnorm, for that. So you may be asking why I brought Whiteboard Coon out this early. This is not a mini recap, but watching episode 12 and 13 today, I've realized several things. I think I have a better picture of, like I said in prior episodes, I'm trying to go through this from a neutral perspective, of understanding both Aaron's perspective, Armin and Mikasa's perspective, and the whole thing. And I've come to the realization that it's not so much that I'm mad at Aaron, and I'm not mad at Armin and Hanji. I'm mad at King Carl Fritz. That's who I'm mad at this point. I just thought of today, or when Erwin in episode 15 of season 1 was asking Aaron, he's like, who's the enemy? Carl Fritz. You know why? Because he screwed up this whole thing. This is pretty much his fault. And I'll explain it to you real quick before we get into this episode. Savagery is what it said. Yeah, we'll get into that. But yeah, so basically, here's the thing, right? We have Aaron's situation, we have Armin and Mikasa and Hanji, we have Historia down there, we've got Flock, Levi and Zeke. Levi and Zeke have giant question marks because one, Zeke is still in the dark for much of this, and I know all of you keep saying, you're like, well, you'll find out about Zeke, and I'm like, I'm waiting, it's fine, I'll get there, but it's question marks, so I'm not even going to touch Zeke. Zeke, he is what he is now. Levi is going through this crisis, and so I'm terrified of what Levi's going through. So there's that. And then we have Reiner. And basically, in all of this, Reiner and co, they're just trying to get Gabby and Falco back and get the founding Titan, because that's what they think is going to help Marley win. And that's what's going to stop parody. So that's their goals. But here's the thing. What's complicating all of this is that we have Aaron. And from season 1, Aaron has always lamented the fact that he's been useless. He's wanted the power to be useful and to fight back, right? And there's been 2 life-altering moments for Aaron in the course of this series, and they really happen in seasons 1 and season 3. In season 1, him losing the Levi squad. That was a big monumental moment for Aaron, because in that moment, it proved to Aaron, he was like, if I had relied on myself and trusted my own judgment and trusted my own instincts, then I could have made a decision that I wouldn't have regretted, and maybe the Levi squad wouldn't have had to die. But because I put my faith in other people that weren't prepared and I didn't trust myself, they ended up dying. So that's been a monumental moment for Aaron. I'm going to bring that back up. But also in Sin and Wish, in episodes 6 and 7 of season 3, Aaron realized, he's like, Aaron was born without freedom. Yeah, Carla makes the suggestion that, you're born free, that everyone's born, because you have the, I'm gonna try to phrase this right. Carla says that everyone is special because they're born into this world, but that doesn't make them free, right? And in Aaron's case, Aaron's really had no freedom from the start, because from the start of this series, maybe in episodes 1 and 2 a little bit, but he was trapped within the walls, and then there was a Titan attack on Shiganshina, but Aaron has not had any freedom. His father, Grisha, gave him the Titan powers. He forced this upon Aaron. Now, obviously, you can say Grisha didn't have a choice in the matter. True. But still, the fact remains that Aaron has not really had true freedom from the start of this. And it's pushed him forward to try to seek it out. And that helps explain some of his rationality in all this and where his headspace is at. And he's tried to find other options and alternatives, as we've seen in prior episodes, but they're not there. That's the problem. And he wants to clearly, I want to make this clear. I do think Aaron cares about Mikasa and Armin. I do. And I think he cares about Historia a lot. And I don't know if maybe I'm not saying that properly in these discussions, but I do think he cares. He wants to protect them. And right now he thinks that Zeke's plan is the only successful way that can happen. He doesn't like it necessarily, but that's the only thing he can think of it working. Unless he has some ulterior motive that we, the audience, don't know yet at this point in the series, which could very well be Aaron may have a plan C going on outside this board that I don't know about yet. We'll find out. But at the moment, it makes sense that he's going along with Zeke's plan because it's the only viable option that could work, that can work now. Everything else, we'll talk about this, requires time that they don't have. And so he doesn't like it necessarily, but he's going through with it anyway because he doesn't see any other options. That's the frustrating part. And so the other thing is too, is that he's being entrusted with all this burden. Yeah, Aaron said back in season 1, he's like, oh, trust me, I can handle all your problems. But then he found out throughout seasons 1 through 3 that he found out that maybe wasn't entirely true. He's like, well, maybe I don't have the power to have everybody invest everything in me yet. Like, that, again, tying to Aaron's feelings of uselessness. But now that he has the power of the Warhammer, and he has the founder and the Attack Titan, and he basically has the means to do this whole rumbling thing, Aaron believes that, okay, before in the past, I naively told everybody to depend upon me when really I didn't have the power to see through what I promised them. But now I do. So yeah, you can entrust me with your problems. But the problem is, one person shouldering an entire country's problems is not feasible. It's gonna break him. It probably has already broken him. So it's insane that Aaron's like, well, now I can shoulder all your burdens. I have the ability and the means to do it. But no one person should have to do that. And it's not safe for one person to do that. So it's a conundrum, right? And then this whole thing with Armin and Mikasa happening, I don't know what's going to come of it. I'll probably add to this board later. But so then I understand Aaron's perspective. I get why he's doing what he's doing. He thinks he's urgent. He thinks he doesn't have any time left. This is the only option that will work. For better or worse, we've got to at least try it and go with it. Now, along the way, some of his methods are questionable. This whole thing with Flock is not, I think Flock and Aaron are kind of on different wavelengths. Flock just sees this as a way to create the new Eldian Empire. I don't see Aaron as really behind the new Eldian Empire. I think Aaron just wants to save the people he's close to, and this is the way that he sees it working. I don't think Aaron's on board with this whole being king of the new Eldian Empire. That's Flock's vision. That's Flock's grand, fantasy about Aaron, right? So he wants to raise parity against Marley in the world because it's going to put parity on top and they're going to have this new empire, blah, blah, blah. I don't think Aaron's quite on the same level as Flock with that. I could be wrong, but I don't think that he is. But that's where Flock's at. And this whole restructuring the military, everything I talked about last episode, I think that that's all like Flock and the rest and the Jaegerists, not necessarily Aaron's mentality about it. But because Aaron's being viewed upon as this like godlike figure, they're just, it's like what was happening in the walls beforehand. You had the wall cult that assumed this one thing about the wall and the Titans, and so they formed this entire religion around something that technically wasn't true. And that seems to be the case of what they're doing with Aaron. They're centering all of this around what they believe and perceive to be a truth that Aaron's kind of like, no, I'm not winging this, but I'm doing this because I have to, not because necessarily I want to. Okay? So then you have over here Armin, Mikasa, and Hanji. And what's complicated about this and what I hate is that I'm totally on board with Armin, Hanji, and Mikasa, what they want to do. They want to have peace and cooperation. We've seen in this series through the last several episodes with Niccolo and Mr. Browse that peace is possible, that there is possibility, and that you can have coexistence and peace. The problem is that it takes time. And that's time they don't have, right? Mark Luzon, thank you for noting this, but Mark Luzon noted that it would basically take, what they're implying is that if you do the math, it would take 50 years for the Hizuru military to help strengthen the defense of parity enough to where they could withstand attacks and prevent, the world from attacking them. So 50 years, that's basically 4 founders worth, 4 different founders. So in order to foster these alliances, they need the time to develop that military and do all this stuff. They don't have it. That's the problem. And Historia is basically doomed regardless. Either way, she has to become a Titan. And we'll talk about Historia after the discussion, after the reaction, because I realize this intro is long. So we'll talk about her afterwards. But yeah, but Armin and Mika say they want to understand Aaron. I think that's my biggest problem right now with Aaron, is that he's trying to protect them, and going back to this moment, relying on himself, he doesn't want to involve Mikasa and Armin because he's afraid they're going to die if he does so. And he's like, I just want to keep you guys out of this as much as I can because I care about you and I don't want you to get hurt. But in doing so, I'm hoping he explains that to them in this episode or something along those lines, because I feel like him not communicating with them is making them question their trust and faith in Aaron, while Aaron has faith and trust in them. So it's like the lines aren't being reciprocated equally. So, but all of this could be prevented if Carl Fritz wasn't a douche lord. Hear me out real quick, and I know this has been a long intro, and hear me out, but real quick. I've noticed this thing about Carl Fritz, okay? 107 years ago, he closed off Eldia, right? And we don't know the full picture. I don't know the full picture. We'll probably find out some more stuff about Karl Fritz as this series goes on. But from what we know at this moment, in episode 14 of season 4 of Attack on Titan, here's what we know. Karl Fritz closed off Eldia 107 years ago on Parody. He left behind Eldians. Why? You could argue he just didn't have time, but he had time to make all the walls with all the millions of Titans. So during that time you're making all these walls, you couldn't get all the other Eldians to come. Okay. So he left behind Eldians. He had time to make the walls. The big thing is he wiped the memories of the Eldians. He wiped their memories of the past so they wouldn't want to leave. He basically trapped them in this prison that he felt was their atonement. He stagnated technology. This is the big thing too, because he stagnated technology. And by stagnating the technology, it has lost them time. They probably wouldn't need this 50 years if the technology had been able to be kept up to the point where, oh, okay, we can defend ourselves, we have the technology. But no, he stagnated it to the point where they don't have the means. So they have to rely on Hizuru. That's the problem. They don't have the time because Karl Fritz took it away from them. So the technology stagnated. He's perpetuated the death of citizens by having the Titans coming at the walls. He didn't stop them. I'm sure he told Tiber that they could just keep sending Titans to the wall because it's part of our atonement. Just keep sending them. If we die, we die. He allowed nobles to take charge and created the gaps in society. So we had the underground where Levi's from. Basically, this idea of paradise was not so, as we learned in season 3. And then my big thing is with Karl Fritz, it's pacifism without progress. It's pacifism without recognition of the past. It's just treating the past like it didn't exist. He's like, we'll just wipe everybody's memories. They won't remember times before the walls. We'll just start anew. But because he did that, then it caused everybody to be so far behind that they can't catch up. And they have to resort to something like this. That's what pisses me off so much. Rewatching this episode, I was like, yeah. It's just Karl Fritz had this whole idea of pacifism, this vow to renounce war, and that's not a bad thing. My conflict is I agree with Armin that you should want peace and cooperation. You should want diplomacy. You should want a dialogue. But it does take time. And Karl Fritz took that away from them. Because he stagnated technology and wiped their memories, they now don't have that time that they could have had before. And so this idea of pacifism without progress, without recognizing the past, by just treating it like it doesn't exist, then history is doomed to repeat itself. And the cycle continues, whether you like it or not. And it's just a setup for destruction and implosion. And that's what's happening. And Grisha came all too late. Grisha came to stop the problem all too late. And Uri was too late. Uri was like, well, I guess all we can do is just create a paradise for now, and it's going to implode. It's always meant to be imploding, but we'll just enjoy it while it lasts. It just really, really ticked me off today. I was like, Karl Fritz is behind it all. He's the enemy. So until we find out more about Karl Fritz, which Isayama may make me eat my words, I was like, man, I'm not mad at Eren. I'm not mad at Armin and Hanji and them. This sucks. Like, this whole situation is dour and depressing and sad, but they're just doing what they can at this point. It's like, what choices do we have? And there's right and wrongs with both of them. And so I'm at this point, I'm like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? How's this going down? And I don't know. And I'm waiting for Isayama to give us more information. And I'm sure he will. It's just, that's where I'm at. Going into episode 14, that's where my headspace is. So I guess after this episode, I do have some more notes. But this intro is already 20 minutes long, and it's not even a mini recap, so, you know, what can we do? So there's that, but I'm going to push this out of the way. Okay, so that's out of the way. I feel better. I've wanted to rant about that all day because I've just been so ticked off, and I'll probably go back to that whole thing and think about it some more, but I'm all hyped up now, so why should we not watch an episode? Yeah, let's do this. So, all right. I've talked enough. Let's go ahead and start, shall we? I hope you enjoyed that little mini rant, but that's where my headspace is now. So we've wanted Eren and Armin and Mikasa to talk, and now we're going to talk. So I'll be honest, y'all, I am terrified of this episode. Absolutely terrified, because it's a landmine. We're about to step on the landmine, and I don't want to, but what choice do we have? So let's just hope that we don't lose any limbs, shall we? So we're going to start episode 14 of season 4 of Attack on Titan. And we're going to start that here in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I'll see you all on the other side. I'm going to try to keep a neutral, unbiased, and objective viewpoint after this episode. Oh my god. This physically hurt. This episode physically hurt. My heart is breaking. I was like starting to feel a little sick to my stomach. I was like, what am I watching? Eren! Okay, so here's the thing. Here's the thing about this. I disagree with Eren about Armin. I don't disagree about Mikasa because yeah, we've been setting this up that something the spark makes sense now, right? The spark, and I'm sure Zeke's told Eren about the Ackermans. I'm sure Zeke has told Eren about the Ackermans and the whole thing. I'm sure that's the case. Okay, I get it. I do disagree about Armin. And the only reason he's visiting Annie is because of Bertolt's memories. I do disagree about that. I think that, yeah, that's part of it, sure. But like I talked to a few episodes ago, Armin was interested in Annie. I don't know, maybe I said Mikasa earlier. Armin was interested in Annie back from season 1 before he even became the Colossal Titan. Like, do we even know if maybe Armin hasn't been visiting Annie until after he gained the Colossal Titan powers. Maybe that's where Eren's getting this. But I'm like, Armin was interested in her before he got the Colossal Titan power. So I don't know exactly about that. But here's the thing. God, Eren, why do you make things so difficult for yourself? Why? The only thing I think of going into this is that it's tying back to what Niccolo did in the last episode, right? Niccolo, when he took the wine bottle to protect Jean and Connie, he got really mean and said some very cruel things. And again, we tie back to Pixis's words. If you to tell a good lie, there has to be some truth mixed in, right? So Niccolo told a lie to Jean and them, saying that, oh, you guys are just Eldians and you think you're better than me and blah, blah, blah. And the reality was that Niccolo was trying to save them, but to save them, he had to be mean and had to say those things to get them to back off. I feel like if I'm going to play Eldian advocate for Eren, if I'm going to do that, then you could argue that, okay, Eren's doing all of this. Eren's being exceptionally cruel in his words. He's not wrong in but the way he said it and some of the things like telling Mikasa he straight up hated her. I was like, she's been in love with you from the start of the series, and to tell her that you hate her. And I think that's a lie. I think what he hates is how Armin and Mikasa are being manipulated. What he hates is that Mikasa is acting not just of her own free will, but because of the Ackerman blood. I think that what he hates is the fact that she's manipulated by the blood. What he hates is that Armin's manipulated by memories. But Eren's saying that he's free. I'm like, are you? Are you free, or are you just telling yourself that? Is that your goal? Your goal is to be free, obviously. But I'm like, are you free? Because Grisha's memories are inside you too. They're inside you too, just like Bertolt's are in Armin. So Eren's saying that he's free. I'm like, but are you though? Because you have these memories inside you as well. And if you're going to blame Armin for being manipulated by Bertolt's memories, then Eren's just as manipulated by Grisha's. So I'm like, But I think Eren was just telling them, he was being so cruel to them. The lie is that he doesn't, I hope, God, I hope. Y'all are convincing me. Those of you that are on board on Eren, you're like, he cares about Armin and Mikasa. I'm like, well, okay. He sure shows it this episode. And my hope is that I'm like, the whole thing with Keith, I was about to cry. Screw Flock. Like, we're going to talk about him. Oh my God, I can't. I was about to cry. This whole episode has made me so sad. But I'm just like, Eren, what he hates is that they're being manipulated. What he hates is that they're being manipulated by their blood, by the Eldian blood. That Mikasa is being manipulated because she's an Ackerman, and it's forcing her, like she fought against Armin to save Eren, and that's the point Eren was getting at, was that she was willing to turn on her friend to save Eren, and Eren's like, that's what I hate. But the way that he phrases it is so awful. And the thing about Eren and Zeke, the thing I don't like at this point, and again, I'm only going by what I know at this point in the story, and it looks like we're getting backstory with Zeke next episode, thank God, finally, and maybe that'll change my perspective, but at this point, what I'm so mad at is that Eren and Zeke are doing it alone. That when Zeke was like, I could explain my intentions to you, Levi, but you'd never understand. And I'm like, that's what pisses me off, is that Eren doesn't think Mikasa and Armin can understand. Like, if you wouldn't tell them, that's the problem. He won't tell them, and he doesn't think that they'll get it. And maybe the thing is that Eren has to die for this whole plan to work, and he doesn't think Armin and Mikasa will be on board with it, which they probably wouldn't be, but this episode was really hard. It was really hard to watch, except for Levi. So the whole thing with the Ackermans, Levi's not bound to anybody. So, because guess what? Zeke, you killed the person he was bound to. So, a monster of your own making, right? A monster of your own making. That's interesting. But again, I also want to talk about that with Levi and the whole being imprinted upon somebody and loving someone. Okay, so Kenny, we could argue, okay, let's break down the Ackermans real quick before I even go through this episode proper. So if we're breaking down the whole Ackerman, and we'll establish what Eren says about the Ackermans here. So we have Mikasa, and Mikasa has imprinted upon Eren. Okay. Clearly, it does not have to be somebody of royal blood, because we've established that we know of Eren is not royal blood, right? And then when we get to Erwin, we'll definitely know that's fact. And then we had Kenny. Now, Kenny pretty much imprinted on Uri. And with Uri, he was royal blood, so he protected Uri. Makes sense with the whole Ackerman thing. But then you have Levi, right? And with Levi, you have Erwin. Okay. So Mikasa right now is attached to Eren. Like that bond is there. The Ackerman bond is there. So she's pretty much tied to him. She won't let anything bad happen to him. Kenny, Uri died, and so Kenny wasn't attached to anybody anymore. So Kenny could pretty much arguably Kenny was free. He wasn't attached to Rod Reese. He wasn't attached to Astoria. He pretty much, like, he could cut Rod Reese's throat. So it's really not, it's not that they're attached to any royal family member. It's a specific one, because he was not attached to Rod Reese. He cut his mouth open and didn't care if he died or not and was going to strangle him. So clearly it's not that they just imprint on one person, and that one person is who they're bonded with. And the idea was that they would bond with somebody in the royal family and keep them safe. Okay. And Kenny bonded with Uri. And then after Uri died, Kenny pretty much was a loose cannon. He could do whatever he wanted to. Honestly, his whole thing that he was a slave to at that point, the whole thing he was a slave to was the idea of power. He was a slave to power. So once Uri was dead, the only thing he was striving after was to become a Titan and gain power. Okay. Levi, I would argue, imprinted on Erwin, because he pretty much wanted to protect Erwin with everything he said. But here's the thing that complicates that, right? But I don't think Levi's imprinted on Eren. I don't think that's it at all. I don't think that's it. I think that's Mikasa's deal. But see, here's the thing that complicates that whole thing with the Ackerman bond, is that at the end of the day, Levi kept being willing to do anything to protect Erwin up until his final moments. But at the end of the day, he let Erwin die. So I feel like that complicates things just a little bit, right? The fact that he did let Erwin die. And maybe it was the fact that was maybe letting Erwin die was saving him, and that's why he could do it. And that's why the Ackerman bond let him do it, because technically, in Levi's mind, at that point, Levi had made up his mind that letting Erwin die was saving him and was the better alternative than him turning into a Titan and dying later. So the bond technically was still there because that's saving him in his mind. Maybe that's it. But the fact of the irony of all ironies in this is that the Beast Titan, Zeke, told Eren, I'm sure, all this thing about the Ackermans, told him about all this when they met up, and which probably pissed Eren off even more, knowing that this bond thing exists. But the Beast Titan told Aaron about this and knows it exists. But yet, because of the Beast Titan, Levi is no longer tied to this bond. The bond doesn't affect Levi anymore. Levi is a demon. He's a devil, and he's not tied to anything anymore. So, how about that? So yeah, Levi is not bound to anything. Levi can do whatever he wants to, because he's not bonded to anybody. So there's that. But yeah, we're gonna talk about this, and I feel like Aaron is purposefully distancing Armin and Mikasa from him. But what I hate is that him and Zeke can't tell what their intentions are, because apparently his plan has something to do with just the two of them and only the two of them, and nobody else can be involved in it. And I'm like, I get what he's trying to do. I hope that my hope is that he's trying to push Mikasa and Armin away to save them. And he's like, the only way I can do that is to make you hate me. If you hate me, then you'll stay away from me. But I'm like, what's going to happen and I think Aaron and them think that they're just going to get this plan to work and there's not going to be any resistance. I'm like, do you not know the group you've been with the last 3 seasons? They're not going to just let you get away with this without putting up a fight. Aaron's just setting himself up to have to fight his friends. And I'm like, do you really want to do that? If Aaron cares so much about Armin and Mikasa, would he fight them? What if he's pushed to the point where he has to kill them? Then what's the point? So that's what chuck that whole thing of markers. But neutral mind. Christopher Peterson said, I joked with him in the comment for episode 12. I was like, nothing bad is going to happen these last 3 or 4 episodes. Nothing bad's going to happen. It's going to be fine. And Christopher Peterson's note was just kittens and rainbows. Kittens and rainbows. So that's my mantra going into the rest of this season, is that I'm gonna be like Aaron saying Tatakai. I'm gonna be like him saying Tatakanai or Tatakai into the mirror, only it's gonna be kittens and rainbows. Kittens and rainbows. keep it 100, right? Okay, let's break down this episode. I'm like wired and I hate it. Gabby got no screen time in this episode. Gabby's just watching this madness unfold. Gabby's like, shit, I thought things were bad where we were. She's like, I thought things were bad where I was from, but y'all are crazy. And all he said was the girl that killed Sasha. The girl who killed Sasha. That's all Aaron knows her as. I'm like, Okay, so we need to go through this episode. This is just bonkers. It's just bonkers. And I know what pisses me off so much at this point is that I have a feeling that Aaron and Zeke have an ulterior motive. I'm sure there's some noble cause they're doing this for, but the way that they're going about it frustrates me to no end. And it's because of where I'm at. Now, get me 5 episodes from now, it may be totally different. And yeah, and Mikasa saying that I don't have to have a reason to save you. God, we're going to talk about this. Yeah, Falco didn't do it. Kill me, not him. And Armin's like, I don't want to kill you. We won't kill you. And she says, but you want to, don't you? And he says, I don't want to kill you. He says, kill this, kill that. It's all you think about. You sound like somebody I know. And that's when Aaron shows up. And it's like, okay, great. And he's like, oh, hey, what's up? And Aaron just looks so numb. He looks defeated and numb. And him looking out the window. There was a shot at the end of season 3 with him looking out that window too. That same window, he was looking out of it in his like Survey Corps gear and everything back, I guess, 3 or 4 years ago. He was looking out that same window. There's so many things I want to talk about in this episode that I'm very curious about. And we'll go through it, but I'm going to get through this intro. God, this episode. So Aaron told them to keep their hands on the table. It was not a voluntary thing. He's like, I want you to keep your hands on the table. Okay. All right. So let's just bring this up here. Neutral as possible. Kittens and rainbows. So Aaron did the whole thing about hands on the table. Okay. To try to keep it cordial. Keep it cordial. And I'm like, Aaron, you're about to be anything but cordial. And so, of course, Gabby's freaked out, and Armin and Mikasa send them, and Aaron's bleeding on the table. And he says, I just want to talk. Conflict isn't necessary to solve Eldia's problems. So, Aaron says that we don't have to have conflict. So, conflict is not necessary, okay? Just tell us where Zeke is. We don't have to have a fight. We don't have to do anything. We can solve LDS problems without conflict. As long as you just tell me where Zeke is. Okay. Sure thing. All right. It's not necessary to solve the problems. And Aaron just looks so dead as he's saying that. He just looks like, again, this looks like what Nicolo did. It looks like a prepared speech. It looks like he's been standing outside preparing this speech to tell them, and now he has to do it, and he's like, which again, I wonder if it ties back to him like yelling fight at the mirror, where he's like, you've got to do this. You have to do this whether you like it or not. I hope that's the case. Don't spoil me, but God, because if that's not the case, if this is not part of an elaborate plan to save everybody, and that and he has to get them on against him in order for it to work, if that's not the case and Aaron has just gone to the dark side, I'm gonna be pissed off. Because I want to be mad at Aaron in this episode. It is taking every ounce of my being to be neutral and be like, no, it's fine. There's a reason behind all this. Isayama has a plan, because Aaron's actions are so frustrating. But there's probably a reason behind it. It's fine. It's all good. It's all good. I'm just going to tell myself that this entire discussion. Yeah. He says, Hanji and the others are fine. We're just moving them. So we're just detaining them. It's totally fine. They're absolutely fine. So they're just, and it shows at the end of the episode that they're all like in a cellar. They're all in a room, all crowded together, the Browse family and everybody. So they're just moving Hanji and detaining them, right? Although, here is the thing. I'm curious. Somebody in the comments was saying that like Flock was Aaron's lapdog, and Flock doesn't, I think it was you, Christopher Peterson, that Flock didn't do anything without Aaron's orders. And I'm like, did Aaron order Flock to beat the shit out of Shadis? Because if he did, I'm going to be kind of mad about that, because Shadis was the whole person that had that. All I could think of this episode was Bystander. I miss Bystander. That episode was so wholesome and wonderful and hopeful. Back when things were hopeful. And that was such a great message that Aaron learned from Shadis, and about being special because you were born into this world. And I'm like, if Aaron told Flock to go and do this thing with the recruits, I don't know. I don't know if I can approve of that. I don't know if I can turn a blind eye to that, because that part really got to me. And we're not there yet. We're far from it. And then Armin says that Aaron, we're the ones who wanted to talk. So I'm going to put Armin over here. And Armin's like, we both want to talk, right? Armin is saying that, okay, you want to talk with us, we want to talk too. We both want to come to the table. He's like, we both want to talk with you about this. It's fine. Let's do this. And he asks, what made you go attack Marley all on your own? Why did you go by yourself? Did Zeke and Yelena really talk you into joining them? And as he's saying this, he's putting them all in, they're putting all into the wagons, Hanji and everybody, and Connie and Falco. So they have Falco with them. Okay. Did Zeke and Yelena really talk you into joining them? And that's what they want to know. They're like, did they talk you into it? And Aaron's answer is kind of the answer to the question, where he just says, I'm free. And they're like, huh? The things I do and choices I make are all decided by my own free will. As like the light is shining on him and he looks like a dark angel. So Aaron's whole thing, I am free. I'm like, are you? Are you really? What is the cost of that freedom, my friend? And so, because Aaron says that all of his choices are his own. Okay. That he's making, his mantra is that everything is his own free will. And that's what separates him from Armin and Mikasa. He gets a little, again, I am hoping this is, all these markers, I'm hoping this is all part of his act, his comedy show, that his comedy show, because from what, his tone sounds a little condescending. He's like, I have free will, you two don't. And that's what makes me mad. And my hope is that the truth of the matter is that he's mad because they don't have free will, okay? He's mad they don't have it, and he wants them to have it. That's what I'm hoping is the case, right? Because that would make me upset too if I knew my two closest friends were being manipulated by something that was beyond their control. That would make me sad too, and I would want to help free them. And so I'm hoping that in the back of all of this, we're going to put Zeke over here, right? That Zeke has, so Zeke and Aaron, apparently they have intentions, right? Hoping these intentions are good. And maybe they're to save everyone. Save the others. Okay, maybe. Why would he turn on Zeke? But again, I don't... Okay, we're going to find out next episode, so we're just going to leave that a question mark. I'm not going to worry about that yet. But his intentions are good, I hope. And so then the idea being that maybe this plan to save them all has something to do with, I don't know, destroying the power of Ymir. That's the only thing I can think of, because I'm like, well, the whole thing with the Eldians, the whole thing with the Ackermans, the whole thing with the Titan shifters, it's all tied to the powers of the Titans and Ymir. So are Aaron and Zeke just wanting to destroy the power of the Titans? Because way back in season 3, Zeke was like, this needs to end with us. We need to stop this now. So I'm sure that maybe they mean to stop the cycle of the power of the Titans. I'm just going to put power of the Titans. Okay. The P of T. Okay. So that's what I'm hoping. But yeah, Aaron's saying they're all my free will. Okay. And he's not even looking at them at this point. He's just looking down at the table. And Aaron looks Armin looks kind of disgusted by that. Armin, like his eyes, he's like, he has like that narrow, his eyes narrow. And Armin's like, so your actions after meeting with Yelena were all you? You decided to do all this? Zeke didn't tell you to? And Mikasa, like, with her teeth gritted. And then Aaron's like, yes, they were. And Mikasa says, no, you're being manipulated. And Aaron looks over at her and he looks so sad. Aaron looks so sad looking at her, because in Aaron's mind, he's like, you're the one being manipulated. Aaron's like, you're the one that's manipulated of the two of us. And then Mikasa's like, but you wouldn't get kids and innocents involved even if they were enemies. Like, you wouldn't do this, right? And Mikasa saying, I know you care more about us than anyone. And it just zooms in on his face. And Aaron looking so... I want to take a picture of it. This face of Aaron's, he looks so sad in that moment. She's like, you care about us, right? And I do... Here's the problem. I want to think that Aaron cares about them. I do. And I can only hope that that there's a lie embedded in this, that he knows that they're being manipulated and he hates that for them and he wants it to stop. And then Mika says, don't you? The reason that you saved me in the cabin, the reason you gave me this scarf is because you were kind. And that's when Aaron, that's when I got a little mad. She says, because she's like, the reason you gave me this scarf is because you're kind. And Aaron shuts her up when she says you're kind. And I'm like, that's a compliment. That's a compliment that you're kind. I feel like Aaron treats that as like it's a disgusting thing. Like being kind is disgusting. No, it's not. And I want to cry with this episode. I do. It's so frustrating. He said, keep your hands on the table. And she does what he tells them to. What he tells her to. And he said, I spoke with Zeke in Liberio, brother to brother. So they did have a conversation, obviously, and I'm sure we'll find out what that is. Zeke knows more about Titans than Marley does. Well, yeah, because I'm sure he does. Because I'm sure Dinah taught him many things when he was a kid about the Titans. But I'm curious what else he knows and how he figured it out. It's tied to the man. So we find out that the man with the dark hair, a lot of you said way back in the basement episode, you're like, there's a guy you should pay attention to. Well, I went back and watched the episode, and it's a guy with dark hair and glasses. I don't know who he is. We get his name, Kasarov, at the end of this. I'll write it out in a minute. But we get the guy with the glasses that played catch with him. All right? And I think it's Kasarva. Yeah. I'm out of wipes, so we'll get his name in a minute. But he basically taught Zeke baseball. He was the father figure that he never had. That's what I'm calling now, is that man was the father figure he never had. So it's interesting, the baseball glove and the baseball, that it's a representation of whatever this man's influence was, and that's what he passed on to Aaron. Interesting. Okay. I'm going to keep that in mind, Mika's comment about Aaron not being manipulated. I'm going to keep that in mind, because Aaron doesn't think he's being manipulated. He says he's free. There's no manipulation here. It's all of my own free will. Every choice that I'm making is my own. Okay. And so, okay, I could believe that Zeke knows about the Titans more so than Marley does. I can totally believe that. And he's passed this knowledge on to Aaron. And then I get so aggravated at this part because he says, Armin, aren't you still visiting Annie? Do you think that's your own free will? Like, it's so, I do take issue with this a little bit because Armin's like, what? And he says, if memories are what shape people, a part of you is Bertolt now. And so I'm assuming that Zeke told Aaron that Bertolt liked Annie. And because of that, now that it's passed on to Armin, that's why Armin likes Annie. But I would argue Armin's liked Annie since before then, though. And he says, within you is an enemy with feelings for another enemy. And he says, Armin, Bertolt has got into your head. I hate that. I hate it because I disagree with it. I disagree. Aaron says that Armin has an enemy in his head. And I don't like that phrasing. All right? I'll say it. I don't like that phrasing because that's Gabby. That's Gabby. That's Gabby saying that they're all enemies. And we've established that, but you just told Reiner back in episode 5, Aaron, that you and him are the same. And you that's why this has to be an act, because Aaron was like, he told Reiner, he's like, you and I are the same. And he basically forgave Reiner and Bertolt and all of them for what they did. So you said that you forgave him and understood why they did what they did. But then you go and you gaslight Armin with this whole stuff about Bertolt being in his head and him being an enemy, and you're being manipulated by the enemy. So Aaron's just throwing it back at him. He's like, you say I'm being manipulated by the enemy Zeke, but you're being manipulated by the enemy Bertolt. And I'm like, but you know that's not true. Like, Aaron, you have to know that's not true because you've said to Reiner. I mean, I feel like Aaron is putting on the biggest act in front of all of them. And it's convincing. If it's an act, it's very convincing. But it's so sad. Like, it makes me want to cry because I hate seeing Aaron like this. I do. And Armin's just so distraught by that. Like, you're the one manipulated by the enemy. And Armin's like, ugh. And then Mikasa gets mad. He says, you too, Mikasa. And he says the Ackermans were intentionally designed to protect LD as king. I mean, that makes sense. We've known that from like season 3. We've known that they said the Ackermans were always the protectors of the king. Makes perfect sense, right? That makes sense. He says, back then, faced with a life or death situation, you heard my order, right? And he said, fight. And yeah, and that ties back to everything. It ties to the crackling in the brain. And so Levi was telling Mikasa, he's like, they faced a life or death situation and knew what had to be done, right? They knew what they had to do in that moment. So, okay. In that moment, instincts awoke from within you. And that was Ackerman blood. Yeah, it makes sense. By mistake, you thought I was the host you had to protect. So, and Mikasa's like, no. And he says, and I will say this, the way that Aaron says, no what? That was, again, if this is all an act, Aaron deserves a freaking Academy Award. He's come a long way since season 2 when that boy couldn't act his ass off in front of Reiner. He's come a long way. If this is all just an act and he's just trying to get Mikasa and Armin to hate him, he's doing a very good job. It's very convincing. I'm just like, why? And she says it wasn't a mistake. And like convincing her that it goes back to the OVA. Yeah, the OVA where the man in the mirror was like, I'll turn this girl into a murderer and you don't have a choice in the matter. It's like, yeah, y'all said that OVA would be interesting in hindsight. But he gave her the scarf though. And he couldn't have known back then. He still gave her the scarf. It was a gesture of kindness. And Mikasa's like, it was because it was you, Aaron. I became strong because of you. Right? And he said, Ackerman with awakened powers apparently gets sudden headaches. Okay? And she's had that. It happens when their old self resists being forced to protect their host. When their old self. So, and the way that Aaron phrases that is so disturbing. He says their old self, when their old self resists to protect the host, they get a headache. Okay. So back in the episode with Louise, Mikasa was taking her down to the jail cell, and Louise was talking to her saying, well, we'll still have victory and devote your hearts, and we're still going to follow Eren. And Mikasa got a headache then. So was it because in that moment detaining Louise was going to be harmful to Eren? Is that why she got the headache? But the fact that he says your old self resists being forced to protect their host, I'm like, God. And yeah, it's messed up. And I'm sure Eren got pissed off about that. And it made him mad. And then he asked if it sounds familiar. And she's like, ugh. And it's like, I feel so bad for Armin and Mikasa because all they wanted to do was talk to their friend. And Eren's just shattered them. Like, what the hell? And then poor Mikasa, she's like, no. And then, your family was made to forget who they are and live only to protect. And he seems disgusted at that. He's like, your family was made to forget who they are and live only to protect others. Which again, Levi, not bound by that anymore. Clearly not, because he didn't protect any of his comrades. He was like, no, screw Zeke. So we'll get to Levi. God, we'll get to Levi. Yeah. And Eren just looks so mad about this. So yeah. In other words, you're slaves. And Armin's like, that's enough, Eren. And Armin's like trying to protect Mikasa. He's like, we get it. That's enough. Now stop. And so Eren is saying that basically the Ackermans are slaves. The Ackermans are slaves because they're slaves to protect others. Okay. Okay. Fine. And he says, do you know who I hate more than anyone? And Eren's like, those who aren't free, just like livestock. And so this thing Eren hates. He hates those who aren't free. Which does make sense because he hated the Titans. They're just like livestock, right? He hated the Titans back at the start of the series. Well, the Titans weren't free. They had no choice in what they were. They were against their will forced to become these monsters. So makes sense he would hate the Titans, right? He would hate the Titans. So he says by virtue he hates Armin and Mikasa because they aren't free, right? The question is, does he hate Historia? And I'm not put on shipper goggles for this at all. No, so just say platonically, does he hate Historia? Because he was mad during Zeke's thing about he got pissed off because Zeke's plan was essentially going to be. But see, that's where it gets complicated, right? Because with Zeke's plan, Historia isn't free, right? With Zeke's plan, Historia is not free because she's basically going to have to become a Titan shifter and have kids. And so that's why Eren was pissed off about Zeke's plan and Historia being involved with it. But if he's talked to Zeke and is on board with the plan now, and he's okay with Historia doing this, I'm going to bring up Beatriz Oliveira brought this up. And now's as good a time as any to bring up this before we go any further. But the idea of, I'm very conflicted because there's been a lot of comments with episode 10 about whether or not Historia is really taking charge. Because it's like half the people commenting say that Historia is taking charge of her fate and doing something that maybe is selfish but is her own choice. And then half the people are like, no, Historia has to do this against her will and she's miserable. So here's my thoughts after rewatching the episode, after seeing all of your comments. I can see the argument that Historia chose to get pregnant, to not become a Titan, and to take matters into her own hands. And by that logic, she kind of is doing what Ymir told her to do. Ymir's like, live for yourself and be free to make your own choices. And so by that logic, Historia could have been like, you know what? Zeke thinks he's just going to use me for this plan, and I'm just going to go along with it and become the Beast Titan and have all these kids and have my life shortened to 13 years and just have it dictated what I'm going to do. No, I'm going to do things my way. I'm going to get pregnant, and then I won't be able to become a Titan, and then Zeke will have to solve his own problems, and Zeke will have to do this plan with Eren, and maybe I'm not even going to be needed. Maybe Zeke and Eren can figure things out and solve this problem without me even needing to become a Titan shifter. Maybe that's the case. Because as Because that would, if that were the case, then Historia would technically be free in that sense because she's making a decision for herself. She's taking matters into her own hands. She's like, yeah, I'm going to become pregnant. I'm going to have to be hidden away, sure, but that's my choice. I'm not going to be used as livestock without my consent. I get that. And apparently Farmhand Coon seems like a nice guy. I don't know the guy. We've never seen his face, but he does seem to care about Historia, so things could be worse. So there's that point of the table that I'm like, okay, I get that. And if that's the case, Aaron wouldn't hate that. She just took matters into her own hands. It flies in the face of their plan, though, so I don't know how that works into things. But then what makes things complicated and what makes me doubt that is that when we see Historia go to the guy, she looks miserable and sad, like she didn't want to have to do this and resort to this. And I feel like if she truly was free and making her own choices, that she'd have a look of resolve when she went to the farmhand. Like, instead of seeing her look miserable and depressed, she'd have like this gleam in her eye, like, I'm gonna mess up the plan and it's on my terms and I'm gonna do it my way and here's how it's going down. Like, I feel like Isayama would show her with a look of resolve, not a look of utter despair. And the look she has on her face in every scene we've seen her in the present looks like utter despair. So that throws that whole thing of her free choice into question, because I'm like, if she looks like she's in utter despair, is it really free choice then? Is it really free will? And that kind of ties to Aaron's whole thing, where he's like, I'm free, I'm making my own choices. But I'm like, okay, well, if that's the case, you're going along with Zeke's plan because you want to, not because it's the only option, not because it's the last-ditch effort and we have to do this because there's no other choice. Because if there's no other choice, that's not freedom. That's you're being forced to do something. So, okay. Anyway, let's keep going. We'll tie back to this. They're just livestock. And God, the eyes, like Armin's pissed off. Armin's like, just shut up, Aaron. We get it. Stop making it worse. And Aaron just, that look in his eyes, he's like, just seeing you has always pissed me off so much. And now I finally know why. Oh my gosh. He says, I hate you, Mikasa. Oh my, I can't stand the sight of a slave who obeys orders without question. And see, that falls in line with Aaron's character. It does. And what I'm hoping is that it's not that Aaron hates Mikasa. It's that he hates that she's being forced to do this against supposedly her will. That's what I think he hates. I hope. I'm like, I think if he really cares about Mikasa, then he hates that she's being forced to be a slave. That's what I'm thinking, right? Oh my gosh, ever since I was little. Yes, exactly. He's always hated that. He says, Mikasa, I've hated you. And I'm like, that has to be a lie. That has to be a lie. He doesn't hate her. He hates that she's forced to be this way. But I'm like, the concept of free will, I still think she loves him regardless. God, it's frustrating. It's frustrating. It's very frustrating. He's like, I've hated you. And she just starts crying, like her whole world's shattered. And then, yeah, and Armin going across the table. Like, how could you say that to her? Like, Armin crawling across the table. Like, just, like, screw this. But, and then Aaron's point is proven. Because she stopped him. She stopped him without thinking. And he says, your entire life has been dictated by your Ackerman blood. And she's, oh, God. And I feel so bad for her. He's like, it's all you really are. That part hurt me too, because I'm like, Aaron, why would you say that to her? Like, he says that that's all she is just her blood. And I'm like, no, that's not true. There is truth in it. There is truth in it. Like, her stopping Armin proved his point. He's like, it did prove his point. And if you notice later on, she doesn't stop their fight because Aaron's not in trouble anymore. Aaron's not threatened because Aaron knows he can win the fight when his arms are, when he takes his hands off the table and he actually fights Armin, which is painful to watch. It just proves his point. When Aaron's not in danger, she doesn't have to do anything, right? She doesn't have to do anything. Because at that point she knew, it's like her blood knew that Aaron was going to win the fight. But when Aaron has his hands on the table and he's defenseless and Armin could, slug him, that's when she stepped in. But God, it's hard. God, this is just making her cry. And then Armin just punches him. He's like, screw you. And I am glad that Armin stands up for Mikasa. But Armin is not a fighter. He's the Colossal Titan, but he's not a fighter. And Aaron's been training all these years. And he's like, I'm all right. And he says, Armin, you and I have never fought before, have we? And Armin's like, no, because you weren't a dick. Because I didn't have to fight you back then. No, you weren't like this. And Armin, swinging at him, he's like, do you know why we haven't fought? Because, he says, it wouldn't be a fair fight. It's not even close to a fair fight. And Mikasa tells him to stop. And I want to say this is an act. I want to say in front of those guards he puts on an act and just beats the snot out of Armin, but I'm like, God, we'll go back to Aaron at the end of this episode, and she's like, please stop. He said, like I said, if you guys tell us where Zeke is, there's no need for us to fight. God. This is awful. And he's like, and when he says, come along and behave, I'm like, oh my God. And he says, take him. I hope this is the most, and the kid who killed Sasha too. And Gabby's like, nope. And then Armin's like, is that really all you came to say? He's like, that you wanted freedom just so you could hurt Mikasa. Mm-hmm. And that look on his face, he does, yeah. God. He's like, that you wanted freedom just so you could hurt Mikasa. And Aaron grimaces like, it's killing him. And Armin says, tell me, who's the slave that bows to a bastard again? Oh, and that gets him. Yeah. Armin's like, who's the slave that bows to a bastard? Like, who is it? You say you think you're free, do you? You're not. You're not, because you have to go along with this plan. Oh my God. And Aaron's like, who are you calling a slave? Yeah. And then to where it all started, Shiga and Sheena. So we're going back to Shiga and Sheena, back to where it all started. And I love that we have the fact the tunnel is through Aaron's eye, the fact the tunnel is going through half of his face. Oh my gosh, it's so good. It's so good. But yeah, I feel like in that moment, Armin maybe kind of sees through, because Armin's smart, and I want Armin to piece together that maybe Aaron has to do this because he doesn't think he has any other choice. But and Aaron's trying to convince himself that he's free. This episode is so frustrating. Yeah. So Armin's like, who's the slave? Armin is saying that Aaron, you're just as much as a slave. Uh-huh. Oh my gosh. She's like, you're not free. You think you are, but you're not. My hope is that Zeke has told Aaron. My hope is that whatever we find out next episode is that Zeke has told Aaron, okay, look, whatever's going on now, we have to do X, Y, and Z to make it all stop. Now, if X, Y, and Z turns out to be we have to kill all the Eldians and everybody, then it's like, okay. But my theory is that Zeke has told Aaron, he's like, okay, you want to save Armin and Mikasa? Fine. We have to do this. And to do this, you're going to have to become a very good actor, and you're going to put on quite a show to make everybody, I'm like, is the whole point to make everybody against you? What's the point? And I know, don't spoil me, I'm going to find out, but right now, watching episode 14, I'm like, what is the point of you coming there and making Armin and Mikasa hate you if Grisha/Kruger's words were, in order to save Armin and Mikasa, you have to follow through with this. Because that's Sasha Purvis noted that to save Mikasa, Armin, and everyone else, you must go through with this, whatever this is. And I'm assuming we're going to find out what this is, either this part 1 or in part 2. We're going to find out what this is. But I'm like, it sucks if going through with saving Armin and Mikasa means turning them completely against you. And I don't think Armin and Mikasa are completely against him. That's the thing. I think after all that what's just happened, I think after everything that's just happened, Armin's pissed off at him, sure. But when we see Armin again in the room, I feel like Armin and Mikasa, I don't feel like they're against Eren. I feel like they're disappointed, sad, angry. And Armin's like, what the hell, Eren? But I don't think they're totally turned against him. I don't know. Why'd y'all have me watch this show? It's making me so upset. And so then, yeah, I love the shot of Zeke with the glasses reflected in the trees reflected in the glasses. I love that shot. Like he's just thinking of a way to get out, okay? And the glasses, now that you look at them, the glasses, they look like Grisha's glasses, but they're the glasses of that man that took him in. Uh-huh. Interesting. I'm curious about who that man is, and I'm assuming we're going to find out next episode. Finally get some shit on Zeke. And then we cut back to Levi. There's another shithead we should have eaten, and it was Zeke. He's like, we shouldn't have waited for Zeke to get back here. He's like, we should have just taken Zeke out now. That's my last question in the last episode was like, who did Levi want to take out? And the answer was Zeke. He wanted Zeke to get taken out. And they're like, what do you mean? He says, we'll give the Beast Titan to somebody else. We'll make one of the Jaegerists into a Titan and have them eat Zeke. Yep. Okay. And then I can't tell if he's manipulating Eren, but their party's over if they lose Zeke. So yeah, Levi's reading the writing on the wall. And here's the thing. It's... I'm trying to make sense of that phrase Armin said, who's the slave that bows to another bastard? The idea that Armin's saying, well, Eren, you can't do anything without Zeke, and we know where he is, so are you truly free? I'm trying to figure that whole phrasing out. I'm sure in the comments we'll talk about it. But, God. Yep. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, Levi's like, okay, well, they need Zeke for this plan. If they don't have Zeke, Historia can't inherit Zeke because she's having a kid, so you know what? Let's just screw them. Screw their plan. We'll just have it to where if they lose Zeke, the party's over. But again, I think Levi not killing Zeke. I'm curious. He's like, go tell that to Pixis. Got it? I don't think Levi's imprinted on Zeke at all because Levi was hacking up his limbs left and right. Unless it's some weird thing where he doesn't kill Zeke. Unless there's some weird thing where the Ackerman blood won't let him kill Zeke because he's a royal family member. That would be a twist. That would be a twist if, because Levi doesn't know what the Ackerman blood does. It would be a twist if Levi could hurt Zeke, but he couldn't kill him because of that bond. That would be interesting if that's what's keeping him from killing him all this time. Because he was going to kill him back then. He kept saying he was going to save him for Erwin. And he got away. And he didn't kill him back because it was part of the plan back then and they needed him. That would be interesting if the whole reason Levi's not been able to kill him is because he's royal family. But I don't know. It's just something curious. He says, the old man will come around once I chop Zeke's limbs off. I said this episode when we started, I was like, hopefully we don't lose any limbs. We lost a lot this episode. Oh my God. And so then, yeah, so Zeke and him have both been drinking tea this whole time. Let it be known. And Levi's not a wine drinker. He's a tea drinker. He's not settled on it. And I'm sure to Zeke's chagrin, Levi has not drank the wine. I'm sure that Zeke's like, well, damn it. I was really hoping that you would, but you didn't. But Levi coming over, huh? And he says, enjoying your book? He says, I am, for one I've read 7 times. Interesting. You've been eavesdropping more than reading. And he's like, can you blame me when I've read it this much? He's like, you didn't give me any other books to read, so what else am I supposed to do? Right? Is there any wine left? And he's like, not a single drop. We've been here a month. So they've been there a month, okay? They've hit out there, so it's been a month since they got back with Zeke. Okay. So it has been 1 month. A month worth of drinking the wine. Okay. And God. So I'm curious. It seems like Zeke's power doesn't fully activate unless he's in close proximity to the people that would shift into Titans, which is a nice caveat because so Pixis and everybody feels it. They feel the ends of their. I was wanting to say this the other day and I didn't get a chance to bring it up, but the whole thing with the tree, right? We established that there's the thing with the tree, right? The tree that is the nervous system. Well, I was going to say is that the tree that is the branches, right? And it's the coordinate. It's the paths, right? The paths, okay? Here's the crazy thing, right? This whole thing, it looks like a tree, but it's also like blood vessels. It's also like the circulatory system in your body, right? Because you have veins that go on arteries that go on capillaries and everything. All the blood goes all throughout your body, and the veins are like this, right? And so it's curious because I feel like at the heart of it, like the heart of the body that pumps the blood is the coordinate. So the coordinate is the heart, right? So the coordinate equals the heart, and they pump blood to all the other parts of the body. And without the coordinate, without the founder, it doesn't work. So I'm curious, Aaron has the founder, so I'm like, my theory is going into this, and I'll touch back on this in the recap, I think Aaron has to die for the whole thing to end. But the question is there a special way Aaron has to die? Because if he just died outright or was just eaten, then the power would transfer to somebody else. Or if he just dies, does the power of the founding titan go to some rando? That we don't know for sure. In theory, you would think that. But I feel like the coordinate is the heart of it all and carries the power to everyone else, right? And since Zeke is royal blood, he's tied to the coordinate in a way, shape, or form. That's why Aaron needs Zeke to do the rumbling, because they have to be together. The royal family member has to be tied to it. So the fact that Zeke's a titan makes him tied to the coordinate. But it makes sense that if his power doesn't work, because if you think of the human body, like you think of the body, right? And I'm going to draw this little body here, okay? So you think of the body. Oh my God. So you think of like my Gumby body here, old Gumby here. So you think of the human body, right? And you think that this is the heart, this is the beast titan, the coordinate. And then you have all these little vines, all this stuff going to the other parts of the body, and you have the brain up here, okay? So the body, the vessels and stuff that are close to the heart, the blood gets to them the quickest, right? And so his power gets to them the quickest. But the further away people are from the coordinate, the longer it takes that power to reach, right? The longer it takes the power to reach from that way. So that would make sense. So the fact that Pixis and Falco and them, they felt the tinge of electricity. They felt him activate the power, but because he wasn't close enough to them, it didn't fully affect them. But they know that it's there. So everybody knows. So Pixis was affected too. Niall, Pixis, they were all affected. They've all drank the wine. Anka has not. Let it be known, Anka did not drink the wine, but Falco felt it too, so it's going to affect him if Zeke gets close. Shit. Great. Glad we've established that, right? Glad we've established that. And he's like, good grief, you sure know how to torture someone. And Levi's like, I hate you, read your book. And he's like, roger that, boss. So, and then he decides he's just going to up and go. So that's all Zeke needed to know. He was like, okay, all the wine's gone. That's been enough. Everybody that's going to get affected, the 30 members that are there are going to get affected. And Levi says, I'm going to chop him up no matter what Pixis says. I'm going to chop him up. And he's like, there are 30 fully armed soldiers waiting in the forest above. Even if he becomes the beast, there's no way he escapes. And they all have the thunder spears. That bearded shit was our enemy after all. And yeah, and again, as soon as Zeke started stretching and yawning, I was like, he's gonna scream, because he did that on the ship. He like yawned and was like, like stretching, like clearing his throat. That bearded shit was our enemy after all. Which is funny. If it turns out that he's actually is in fact the savior of all humanity, that'll be the irony of all ironies that Levi thinks that, and now that we know it, he doesn't deserve to have limbs. Him saying, yeah. And so it took long enough. And so then, okay, we're tying this back to the bond. Erwin, I'll finally uphold the promise that I made to you. And in that moment, yeah, in that moment, Levi's like, I'll kill the beast titan. And we see his view of Erwin shining in the sunlight, right? I'll finally uphold the promise that I made to you. So yeah, so we could argue that Levi is still affected by the bond, but Erwin's dead now, so all he has is the remnants of that bond. And the only remnant left that he has, the only thing left unfulfilled from his duty to protect Erwin, has been to kill the beast titan. And so he's like, fine, I'll do it. But again, if we tie this whole thing with the Ackermans and Levi activating this power, and if it is in fact for Erwin, then then I do think Levi has acted somewhat on his own. So Aaron's words, I don't think are entirely true about Mikasa. I think he's psyched Mikasa out by them. And Mikasa, Mikasa has done things to protect Aaron, by and large, that you could argue is the Ackerman blood at work. Sure, I will not argue that a bit. But I feel like Levi, if he's been tied to Erwin, he's done some things too that don't quite fit in line with what Aaron was telling her. So I guess we'll find out, right? But just, it's interesting. There was meaning in your deaths. At long last, I'll prove it. So yeah, Levi's like, I'm not going to let you all die in vain. And that's when he just sees the book's gone and Zeke is running away. And he's like, son of a bitch. And he's running away because he's like, well, hell. I love Levi's just like, huh. like he's just really running away. Like he has nothing to lose. And because he's going to scream and turn them into... And then, yeah, him screaming. And Levi's like, what the hell? And in that moment, the hey sound. In that moment, I think Levi realized in that moment that they were screwed. He's like, oh my God. Because Levi's face, he just looks like, wait a minute. Oh no. Because Levi said, whenever he said hey back when Erwin, he said that, it was very Kinney-like. He said that back when Erwin said he was going to go on that mission to Shiganshina. And him just screaming. And they all fell with the thunder spears and everything in the book. Oh my God. So yeah, so we're going to talk about this. So the 30 men turning into Titans all around Levi. And Levi's like, well, shit. And Levi just looking awful about it. Yeah, and that look. Okay. Information for public disclosure. The spinal fluid wine. A red wine produced in Marley with Zeke Wonderboy Jaeger's spinal fluid mixed in. After consuming Zeke's spinal fluid and hearing his scream, subjects of Ymir will turn into pure Titans who obey his orders. The wine and Titans have proven to be a cheap and effective weapon to conquer enemy nations. So this wine, the Southern Marley wine, has been used not only in parody but in other locations as well. I'm curious to know how much spinal fluid it takes. And I guess since they regenerate, it that he can replenish the spinal fluid, fine. But damn. Yeah, I feel so bad for Levi in this moment. Because, yeah, all of his comrades being turned into Titans in front of him. Yep. Cheap and effective weapon, huh? And they were, Aaron and them were totally on board. And then, yeah, okay, so everybody except Petra. Their body went numb. And Petra's like, I didn't feel a thing. Petra's like, I didn't drink any wine. I'm underage. So, yeah, but Pixis has too. And then Niall has too. Niall and everybody. Yeah. All of them. And then the one Jaegerist did not, and Hanji has not, and is noticed Falco. I felt like I got zapped by electricity. So yeah. And Hanji's like, shit, it didn't work. What we didn't work, it's still there. And Pixis has figured it out. He's like, Zeke's done it, hasn't he? Mm-hmm. Yep. This is goodbye, Captain. You care about your subordinates. You're not going to slice them up just because they've grown a bit, are you? That's so cruel. Mm-hmm. And so in this moment, Zeke is throwing Levi's words right back at him. Zeke is like, oh, you just got onto me saying that those lives were meaningless and I just threw them all away. But Zeke's like, I did it for survival. So now he's making Levi go through the exact same thing. It's the cycle of violence, right? He's like, I killed those people because it was necessary for me to live, to fight another day. So I'm going to make you do the exact same thing and eat your words. And it's like, oh, okay. And Levi and them all going after him. Yep. And them all being able to do what Zeke says, them being able to climb trees and everything. It's awful. And he's like, why? Why bring wine on a mission? And Levi questioned it from the start. He's like, and they said it's the rare Marleyan stuff that only the MPs get to drink. And they brought cases of it. Don't we deserve some? And you can see the girl in them that got transformed too. And Levi's like, and they all clamored after it. Like looking at all those hands, like that imagery. Oh my God. The imagery of all of them clamoring after the wine. And Levi, it ties back to what Kenny said, them being a slave to something, right? Everybody's a slave. But again, here's Kenny's words. Kenny Ackerman. And again, you can argue that Kenny was an Ackerman, so of course he would say this. It's in his character. But Kenny's saying that everybody is a slave to something, right? All right. But Aaron doesn't seem to believe that. Aaron tells him, he's like, oh, I'm free. I'm not a slave to anything. I'm like, everybody's a slave to something. That's not necessarily a bad thing. You could argue that maybe Kutchel's imprint was on Levi himself, right? But Kutchel was a slave to her child. That's not a bad thing. Being, loving your child and wanting to protect them. And again, Aaron views, it's so sad. Aaron views Mikasa's devotion to him as slavery. He's like, you only like me because you're forced to. He's like, your blood forces you to like me. And I'm like, again, y'all should watch Yona of the Dawn. It's great, but there's a tie to this whole thing about blood and being a slave to it and imprinting on people. There's a call back to that in that series. But the thing about Yona of the Dawn is that in that series, the ones who are being enslaved, supposedly, they start to justify being like, how much of this is the blood manipulating me and how much of this is my own free will to like this person. And I feel like the same thing would apply to Mikasa and Kenny and Levi. Like, at some point, yeah, the blood's influencing you, but does that mean that none of Mikasa's emotions were real? I think in this moment, Aaron's suggesting that none of Mikasa's emotions towards him were genuine. And I'm like, I don't know if I agree with that. And I'm hoping that Aaron doesn't agree with that either. That's just part of an act, but I don't know. But yeah, Kenny's saying everybody's a slave to something, and watching these people clamor over the bottle and all the liquor. And he says, and then Levi, fine, bring it. And now Levi's like, damn it, hashtag no regrets. He's like, I let them bring the wine. I shouldn't have. And now he's like, Zeke's spinal fluid was in the wine. Since when? I love that he's like, since when was this a thing? Since when was this happening? Not a single person froze up. Was it all a lie? Yeah. And he's like, shit, they're fast. How do they move like that? Is this Zeke's doings too? He's like, what's causing this? And then, yeah, Levi having to jump down and then nearly getting killed and slicing the fingers up. And then when he looks at the person and he says, Varys. I'm going to write down on the list of the dead, old Varys. So we have here in episode 14, right? We have Varys. He died. He's named. We'll mourn him. But yeah, in that moment, and in Levi's mind, he's like, okay. He's like, are you in there somewhere? Oh my God. And the light, you guys, and the light shining on Levi. Oh my God. Like the symbolism of like all these titans surrounding him and him being like, all my comrades are in there, but they're not them anymore. They're as good as dead, right? It's like, And I love that moment where Levi is falling down and his eyes like start to narrow just a bit, right? And all of them are surrounding him. And him just looking, are you somewhere in there? It's, God. And Levi has to make a choice. He's like, do I kill my comrades or not? Because I'm going to die if I don't. Which option will give me the least regrets? But here's the thing. We've established that once they turn into Titans, unless they eat a Titan shifter, they're just stuck in this nightmarish state forever, right? A lot of you commented back in season 3 when Aaron said, oh, don't kill that one Titan. He's a fellow patriot. Just leave him. A lot of you were like, I felt bad for that Titan because a lot of you said you felt bad for that Titan because you're like, he just is going to struggle against the ground. Wouldn't it be better just to put him out of his misery now? Because otherwise he's just going to be in that state forever, right? And maybe they did, maybe they didn't. And I think Levi in that moment's like, the moment Zeke gave you all this wine, y'all were going to die anyway. Y'all were basically dead. So what I do now, it doesn't matter at this point. Because he's like, I might as well just put you out of your misery now. But Zeke, what have you done? You've unleashed a monster. Yeah, and I think in that moment, here's the thing. If anybody's free in this series, I don't know if it's Aaron, but it might be Levi that's the free one in all this. because Levi's like, I'm making this choice because it's my own. And Levi's like, I'm not tied down to anything anymore. I'm just going to do what I want to do. I think that this is like the moment that Levi becomes free, is him taking matters into his own hands and being like, fine, just let's do this. And then, yeah, Zeke's like, well, farewell. In the end, we couldn't trust one another. I'm like, gee, I can't imagine why. I'm like, you've not been suspicious at all, Zeke. You've not been suspicious at all, drugging these people with stuff to turn them into titans. Why would Levi not trust you? I can't imagine why. That's the thing. Zeke doing all these things out of, him bringing in the wine, him doing all these additional measures. Yeah, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Everything that they're doing, I get it's for a mission, and it's for that. I can see the argument that it's going to be for the greater good, supposedly, but the way that they're going about it is frustrating for me as an audience member, because I'm like, okay, there clearly is an ulterior motive. You clearly have some secret plan in mind, and it's probably to save the world, sure. But when Zeke's like, in the end, we couldn't trust one another, I'm like, well, you wouldn't tell Levi all these answers because you said he wouldn't understand. You wouldn't put any trust in Levi to understand, okay? You were secretive. You drugged all of his comrades and turned them into titans and left him to die. I don't know why he wouldn't trust you. I don't know why that would be the case, right? All the world's might will soon fall upon this island. You have no idea what that means. And that is true. I do think that there is some truth in that. The Zeke is correct in that Parody does not understand what that means. I do think that. That goes back to that whole thing with Carl Fritz. That since King Carl, since he wiped their minds and locked them up in this little bird cage all alone on the island and kept them shut out from the outside world, they don't know. I do agree with Zeke on that. They don't know what's outside, right? And the Marleyans have tried to tell them that. True, back in episodes 9 and 10, the Marleyans tried to warn them about that, but there's still so much left unsaid that I don't want to pass any judgment until I watch the rest of this part 1. But I do agree that you thought you had power, time, and choices. So what Zeke is suggesting is that Parody, if I can spell it right, that as of right now, Parody is powerless, they have no time, and they have no choices. Okay? That's the situation that we're in. You thought you had power, time, and choices. Okay. But not realizing you had none of those, Levi, was your biggest mistake. And I would say, Zeke, you've severely underestimated Levi again. Yep. So, but again, God, this is frustrating. Still, even if I explained my intentions, you wouldn't understand. I'm like, how do you know that? How do you know that? You won't tell him. How do you know that? And I know there's probably a reason. I know next episode we're probably going to find out something that has to do with all that, but it's just me as the audience member being like, if you won't come to the table and try, there's no faith there, right? Zeke has no faith. He just believes, he's like, I've seen that the world is corrupt and that it's twisted and there's no faith. So it's a very nihilistic view, right? It's a very nihilistic view. And I want to tie that back to what Sacha Purvis was talking about what Armin and them represent. So, and we'll talk about Flock here too, but Sacha Purvis, I'll go ahead and bring this up, was the idea that on Patreon saying that there are naturally Gabby and Flocks in the world, and we'll talk about Flock, but there are naturally people like Gabby and Flock, and Gross, I would argue, I'd add Gross to that, in the world, that just see the violence and conflict as a means to an end. That it is, we'll do this and it'll be justified by the end result, right? Flock is saying that, Flock's like, well, yeah, we're doing all these violent acts, but it's leading us towards victory, so it's justified. So we can do it and it's fine. Gabby saying that, yeah, they killed us first, so we're going to kill them back and it's going to justify us winning. The means justify an end, right? But as Uri says, that there's also a miracle that can happen where you can have peace and a dialogue and diplomacy come out despite the violence. Like Uri and Kenny's friendship, I always go back to Friends, and the idea that Uri and Kenny are a perfect example of a situation where the violence could have been perpetuated, but Uri, in the position of power, took a stance to use diplomacy and forged a friendship with Kenny through understanding and a dialogue. And yeah, it's a miracle. It's a miracle, but it's possible, right? That's the problem. It's possible. I mean, we see it in our own world that we've had wars and destruction over time. And then from those wars and destruction, yeah, it's not perfect. There's still conflict, but there is some diplomacy that is able to happen. And from that comes the chance for dialogue and friendship to forge from it. So it's not impossible. It just takes time. That's the problem. Is that right now, there's not time on the table. That's the biggest burden in all of this. That's the biggest hindrance. But that there needs to be Armins and Falcos in the world that do believe that peace and diplomacy is possible. And I feel like Falco has gotten to this point because he's gained knowledge and perspective. Like a lot of times we seek out violence as an answer because we don't understand the other side. It's a very big trope in lots of storytelling, the fear of the unknown. And when you don't know something, the easiest reaction is just to lash out against it and destroy it. What you don't know, just get it out of the way. If it's gone, we don't have to worry about it. Out of sight, out of mind, right? That sort of thing. But that's not conducive towards sustainability. It's not conducive towards a future of anything. If you just keep destroying things, then what happens? What are you left with? And so eventually you've got to do something different, right? And so I like that Sacha said that there needs to be those that reject nihilism like Armin, not celebrate it. And I feel like Zeke is celebrating it here a little bit. But again, I don't want to judge because I haven't seen the next episode. And I feel like we're getting Zeke backstory, so my view may change. Isayama has time and time again made me eat my words. And so Sasha was posing the question, where does Eren stand in all this? Is Eren nihilistic? Or where does all the violence stop at and how do we stop it? So, I don't know. He's complicated. I don't know. But we'll talk more about this anyway. But yeah, getting back to the episode, you wouldn't understand. And so Zeke's like, right, Eren? And so then we see the ball being tossed from Zeke to Eren. And I like that in this moment when you see Zeke and Eren standing side by side. I think Eren's a little bit taller than Zeke because Eren looks a little hunched over. He's got the crutch and Zeke's standing up straight. And Eren has the hobo Eren look, as you all have called it. But he says, right, Eren? He says, only you and I do. So what he's saying here, he says, even if I explained my intentions, you'd never understand. Only Eren and I understand. So it's basically saying like only the two of us can be charged to change everything. And he passes the ball to Eren. Okay. Like as in the ball's in your court. And he says, once I escape this forest, that's where you'll be. So, yeah. He says, I hope you remember where and when we're supposed to meet, Eren. Which isn't happening. The where and when has changed, right? Supposedly. Okay. I hope you'll remember the where and when. So, but that's curious. That's what I want to note here, is that supposedly Eren was supposed to meet Zeke outside of the forest at Shiganshina, right? That's where they were supposed to meet, supposedly. Because he said they were going to Shiganshina where it all began. But Zeke says outside the forest is where we'll meet. So, okay. Which, I guess if they're going through Shiganshina if they're going through the forest of the giant trees towards Shiganshina, that would add up. But when we cut back to Eren, when he's looking out the window, I'm like, you would think if Eren and Zeke were supposed to meet up at a certain time and place, that Eren would want to be on the move and get there, but he seems to be taking his time. So, I don't know. Maybe Eren and Zeke are both, maybe Zeke's a little bit ahead of schedule and Eren's on schedule. I don't know. So, but they were supposed to meet up somewhere. Okay. Which again is curious. I guess Eren sending the Jaegerist to go find Zeke is the logical thing. But again, that leads me to believe that we need to turn whiteboard over. I'm like, wait a minute. Okay. So the curious thing about all this is that Eren has told, so by Zeke's logic, Zeke and Eren are supposed to meet up together. Okay. And Zeke said beyond the forest. All right. And Aaron said Shiga and Sheena is where they were headed. Now, I don't know. What we don't know is, was Aaron just going to leave Flock and all of them at Shiga and Sheena, and then he was going to find Zeke? But then that leads to the question of Aaron sent Flock to go find Zeke, right? He sent Flock to go find Zeke, but here's the thing. If Aaron knows Zeke's power, and Aaron is supposedly aware of the wine, because Flock and all them are aware of the wine, so Aaron probably knew that Zeke was going to use the wine. So why did Aaron even send Flock and them to go find Zeke if he knew Zeke was going to get out of the situation anyway? I guess to ensure that it happens, to try to speed up the process maybe? I guess they didn't want to wait around in case of something like with Levi happened. They wanted to send Flock to go find Zeke. Okay, sure, but they're supposed to meet up at some rendezvous point together and see each other. Okay. And that's when he's like, yeah, nah, bitch. And oh my God, I wish I could freeze frame on that moment. Zeke's face looking terrified. And oh my God, there we go. There's a shot of Levi with blood all over his face, looking like a demon. Oh my God. And Zeke's like, you're the last. He's like, go! Zeke's like, get out of here. And he sends him after him. And Levi's like, no, screw you. I have the thunder spears. Nope, gonna attack you. And yeah, he's like, the hell, damn it, again. And he's like, again? I'm like, bitch, you don't know Levi. You don't know Levi Ackerman. And yeah, him having to bite his hand. And it's curious, biting his hand, yeah. A lot of you commented that way back in season 3 that Aaron bit his hand like Frida does, in which he does kind of do it, but I guess Zeke doesn't have a choice. But here's the thing. Zeke biting his hand too. Armin didn't bite his hand back when he became the Colossal Titan at the bay. He just bit like the inside of his cheek or something. He was like, I bit his inside of his cheek to turn. So I don't know if necessarily Aaron doing that back then was because of Frida specifically or just because of something, I don't know. Interesting. But yeah, so him turning into the Beast Titan and Levi's like, nah, I'm getting out of the way, monkey boy. And this music, the music that played during this scene, what the hell? And then, okay, here's the deal. Zeke, savagery. This whole episode is called Savagery. There's a lot of savagery that goes along in this episode, right? So let's break it down. Savagery. We have Aaron's truth bombs to Armin and Mikasa. We have Flock to old Keith. We have Levi, obviously, and we have Zeke. Okay. And so Levi's like, you forced me into a corner. I'm going to fight back, damn it. And so, but then Zeke just ripping the Titan's head, like just rip the Titan's damn head off to throw it. He says, where are you? Where'd you go, Levi? And then, yeah. And I will argue this. A lot of you said that some of the models on Mappa are a little weird. The Beast Titan is a little weird in this episode. It is a little bit. I don't mind it. It's fine. Again, wit, Colossal Titan. Animation's fine. But it is noticeable. I would be remiss not to say that, yeah, the Beast Titan's movements are a little jerky in this. It's fine, though. And he has, like, the weird volcano nape on him that Levi's like, bullseye, target acquired. But, yeah. And then him just... He threw off the head like he was going to throw it like a baseball, and then he got pissed off because they're in the forest of the giant trees, and he crushed the head like a watermelon, and then just got and put it into chunks that he could throw to try to get out the line. And then he just splits the body apart. Savagery, like Zeke. Oh my God. He says, what happened to your lovely buddies? Don't tell me you killed them all, the poor things. I'm like, yeah. And Zeke's just pissed off at this point. And yeah, Levi did kill them all. Mm-hmm. He did. And I love that Levi, God, that I want to take all the pictures of Levi in this episode. Twitter's just going to be just pictures of Levi in beast mode, right? Mm-hmm. And yeah, he's looking around for him. And then him throwing the chunks. And the chunks just destroying the trees, right? And he says, branches. And he says, you're looking desperate, hairball. All you had to do was read your damn book. The dynamic between Levi and Zeke is one of my favorite things in this season. I friggin' love it. And yeah, Levi's like, you just had to do one thing, but you couldn't do it, right? Mm-hmm. What gave you the idea that you could escape from me? Yes! Didn't you think I wouldn't kill my comrades if they turned into Titans? Oh, honey, no, no, no. And I love this line. You don't have a damn clue how many comrades we've killed. Oh my God. And that ties back to Erwin and the Mountain of Corpses. It ties back to Erwin and that. And God, it's kind of self-loathing. It's so self-loathing on Levi's part because Levi's like, you don't understand, Zeke. Erwin and I have been killing comrades for like the last 3 seasons. It has been like weighing on their hearts this entire time. Like the whole thing when Zeke was attacking them at Shiganshina and Erwin's like, Levi, you and I have killed so many of our friends through our actions. And it's like, we have to atone. So Levi's like, screw you for thinking you know me, right? You know, Zeke said back a few episodes ago, he's like, oh, you don't know me, Levi. And Levi's like, you don't know me either. I love the dynamic. I love it. And then, yeah, him throwing up the chunks and Levi just going through them. And then, with the thunder spears, right on the nape, baby. I'm like, you just had the perfect bullseye. And it goes right through him. And Zeke being like, well, shit. And he doesn't even care. He just blew him out of there. God, Levi, my dude. I want to get a picture of it so badly, that one shot. Oh, I love it. Levi may be one of my favorite characters in this series. You know what? Levi's always been like in my top 5. And Reiner has slowly slid his way into there, but Reiner's like a character I want to like give a hug to, like because of Reiner's whole depression and spiral, and I want to just hug him and tell him it'll be okay. But Levi may have elevated himself to like my top 2. Like Armin, I love Armin a lot in this. I love Armin in this series. Our King Jean. I love Reiner. But Levi might be up there. Levi might be in my top 2 because what a badass. And yeah, and God, his body, like Zeke has guts hanging out. Like the body, like is Zeke's giant pecs. His massive pecs. Dim titties are out. And the rib cage and guts, like he is barely alive. Like how even? Oh my God, like just a freaking corpse. And Levi's like with the sword. He's like, oh, hey there, Beardy. Mm-hmm. He's like, you stink and you're filthy, you ugly piece of shit. Uh-huh. Well, no worries, because I'm not going to kill you yet. Damn. And then we just see like the jaw of the Titan with the tongue just hanging there. If there's been anything satisfying, it's not that we're not supposed to, Isayama's message is not to have the violence in the system. You're not supposed to like the violence, but after Zeke pulled that move of trying to kill Levi by doing the cruelest thing he could think of, and that's having his comrades turn against him, I don't feel so bad about Levi blowing him up. I don't know. Isayama may make me eat my words next episode when we hear Zeke's tragic backstory again, but for now, we're going back to Shiganshina and saying, as you know, after Premier Zachary was killed. And so the situation became unstable. So we go back to Shiganshina, and Keith Shaddis is just trying to do his job, damn it. That's all he's trying to do. Keith is like, my job is to train these cadets. I don't ask for much. And so poor Keith, this is the part where I got really emotional. Because Keith is like the 109th cadets. So 5 years later, 109th cadets will be training to defend Shiganshina from Titan attack. And so here's the ironic thing about all of this, right? Here's the irony of all ironies, right? Because if you think about it, you have, and none of these cadets look happy. They're all looking off to the side. There's like a couple looking at Keith. The rest of them are like, okay, sure. It's like this Gen Z. They're not having any of Keith's old outdated ways. No. Keith's a Gen X. It's just not working anymore. But here's the thing. All I could think about when he was saying you'll be trained to defend Shiganshina from a Titan attack is that these cadets are all thinking we will never have a Titan attack again. They're thinking that the real enemy is the world outside of Parity. The rest of the world is the enemy. The Titans that are coming up against the wall anymore, it's outdated. It's antiquated. They're not the threat anymore. But they very well could be. Keith may be onto something, because if Zeke turns these people into pure Titans, if Zeke turns the MPs into pure Titans, it's all within the walls. It's all within the walls, right? So, yeah, they're Titans within the walls. This is the part of the plan that, again, I'm like, there better be something good going on with this plan, because you're turning people who are in the military here, you're turning people in the Survey Corps into Titans, people who have families, by the way. This is what Mikasa was getting at with Eren. She's like, you realize if these Titans are within the walls, if Zeke turns these other cadets and everything into pure Titans within the walls, then he has them under his control. Sure. And so you could make the argument, well, Zeke's not going to have these Titans just running amok, killing random people. He's going to use them as weapons against their will. So I'm so conflicted about this plan, because so you could argue that Zeke and them are turning all the upper military into pure Titans, and Zeke's going to command them and turn them into weapons to use against Marley. Okay, sure, you could say that, but who's to say that's really what he's going to do with them? Who's to say Zeke isn't going to just have the Titans start attacking people within Eldia? Who's to say that's not going to happen? And then these cadets that Keith is training, and Keith's giving them the message. He's like, you guys need to be prepared for a Titan attack. And they're all like, sure, like a Titan from where? What if these guys end up having to fight Titans? And Keith is right. It's like, we're going to go back to this. But yeah, none of them are really on board. He's given his speech, and none of them, and it's so sad. And Keith's like, Keith knows that they're not paying attention. He knows that. I felt so bad for Keith in this moment, because when you go back to season 1, Keith was like putting the fear of God into Eren and Sasha and all of them. Like him yelling, like had Sasha scared shitless and had them all quiet. And Keith had such authority and power. And now he's struggling to keep these kids even listening to him. Like there's guys in the back talking to themselves during his whole speech. He's like, chewing this kid out, and there's guys in the back talking that they just don't respect Keith. They don't view him as a threatening figure at all. And I was getting so sad about it. I was like, no, it's Keith. He's, and so he just picks on this one guy. He says, you hear me? He's like, and then the one guy says, why do we care how to cut a Titan's nape? It's not like they'll attack again. Our enemies are people now. Yeah. And so they don't think that the Titans are a threat anymore. My old man thinks we should be training with firearms and form an Eldian army. That the military, we shouldn't fight Titans anymore. We should be fighting other people, so we need to start an army. We should change our priorities. The times have changed, and Commander Shadis is stuck in the past. Well, I don't know. History could repeat itself, since nobody seems to be learning, since the cycle of violence is continuing. Old Keith Shadis may not be too far off, because nothing's changed. So, but yeah. And then this is when this one guy says, Eldia's only hope is for the Jaegerists to seize full control. And then Surma. So Surma is this guy with the glasses, old Surma. He can hear you. And I'm sure Keith can't. And Surma says that's what everyone's thinking, right? Everyone wants to join Eren Yeager and lead Eldia. And so the ones closest to him are the ones that follow him. Okay. We need a leader capable of making tough decisions. Yeah, you could argue that Eren and Zeke, their whole thing is, yeah, they're making tough decisions. My thing is your tough decision the right decision? Just because it's a tough decision doesn't always make it right. Right? Frustrating. And Keith, you can tell Keith looks back at him like, am I really going to walk back out over there and like lecture you? But even he knows, he's like looking down being like, he just feels like a bystander. Keith feels like a bystander, like he's not special. He's not someone like Aaron Yeager or Grisha that can lead. And the fact that Keith knew all this was going down back then, and now he has to deal with the fact that Aaron's going through with all this and saying, you know, Grisha, you created this monster. Are you happy? Is this what you wanted? I feel like Keith in that moment when he looks down, he's thinking, is this what you wanted, Keith? Grisha? Keith's like, is this what you wanted? Is this what you thought was going to happen? And then that's when Flock shows up with Hanji. Bless Hanji. They are staying tough. I got really nervous in this episode. I got really nervous here that they were going to do something to Hanji. That they were going to attack Hanji or make them suffer in some way, shape, or form. I got really nervous about Hanji for a second. I was like, if you attack them... But no. And I want to note that, like, Hanji in all white, like, draped in white, like, looking like the innocent person in all this. It's interesting. But yeah, Flock. And of course, Commandant. Long time no see. Just so you know, this branch is under new management. We Jaegerists are the ones in charge now. And they point their guns at them. From now on, you take orders from us. And they're all surprised, like all the cadets. And then Keith says, looks like you finally figured it out, Flock. Unless you point your guns at people, nobody cares what your little gang of asswipes says, and that's a fact. So, yeah. God, Keith. Keith points out, he's like, unless you start using violence, nobody's going to care what you have to say. Like, you have to point a gun and threaten people to get what you want. That's what he's suggesting. And I'm like, oh, Keith, honey. Yeah. And then, God, when he fired at him, he missed his foot. At that point, I was like, no, screw Flock. I was like, I love Keith. Keith's one of my favorites from last season. And Keith has so much balls. And I love that he just looks down at his feet and Keith's like, and I'm like, Flock, you don't understand. Keith has wanted to die for like since before Grisha. Keith has like never thought of himself as special. Well, he did think of himself possibly as special. Grisha got his hopes up. But ever since Grisha died, I don't think Keith has like been ready for death. Oh my God. And then Hanji's like, what are you doing? Hanji's like, why are you firing at him? And he says, I missed. I thought shooting his foot might speed things up. God. Well, to let it be known, Flock is a piss poor shot because you were 5 feet from that man. So either you're lying or you have a terrible aim and your training with the Jaegerists is useless. Don't have him train the cadets. And then Keith's like, speed up what? And then he says, no, it has nothing to do with you. We have little need for hard-headed geezers like you. I feel so sad. He says, now's your time, cadets. And then Flock tries to make this impassioned speech. And here's the thing. There is, again, me being a neutral party in all of this, there is some truth to what Flock is saying. He says, now is your time, cadets. We Jaegerists have sworn to give our hearts to save Eldia from this crisis. So Flock says that not for the sake of our obsolete military, but for the people of this island. So, okay, you know what? If we're going to be fair to Flock, that he says you're not serving the military, you're serving the people, which is a nice sentiment. Yeah, sure, okay. You're serving the people. So he's like, are you following the military or are you following the people of Eldia? Do you want to say the people of Eldia or this antiquated society? Okay. And so then Flock tells all the cadets, by obeying the military's archaic mindset, you're allowing us to be trampled by enemies from the outside. Again, what he's saying is not wrong in this sense. Yeah, because the mindset is a little bit archaic. I do think Keith's onto something. These Titans may need to be fought in the future. Possibly. And I'll talk about this at the end of the episode. Okay. But Flock is not wrong. Yeah, the military is a little bit archaic. And he's like, because of what we've been doing, we've been trying to cling to the ways of the past, because that's all we've known, thanks to King Carl Fritz, we will be trampled by enemies. He's not wrong. He is not wrong. If they stick to archaic methods, they are going to get attacked from the outside, and they're not going to know what to do. And he says, who are you? And I like that Flock gets all passionate with this. He grabs his Burger King coupons. He's ready to go. And so, someone who wants to live alongside our leader, Aaron Yeager, or someone who will die alongside Keith Shaddis and his antiquated ways. So when Flock says, do you want to live with Aaron or do you want to die with Keith? That's so sad. That's so sad that it's phrased that way. In front of him! Yeah. He's like, do you want to live with Aaron in the future or do you want to die with Keith in the past? And it's not that simple. It's not. But poor Keith, like, just sitting there taking it all. Just taking it all. God, I hate it. And so then some of them step forward. The Surma guy and some of his friends, they step forward. And they say that for the sake of Eldia's future, we'll give our hearts. And he's like, good, now show me your resolve. And he's like, beat Commander Shaddis till he can't stand anymore. And that's when they're like, wait, what? And then Flock has the gall to put his hand on Keith's chest saying he represents the old ways that must be driven out. Now do it. Like it's a hazing. Like it's initiation. Like, okay. And God, Keith is so much taller than Flock. He is so much taller than him. And he just looks down at his fist like, bitch, really? Like that's just, do it. God. Those who can't go to prison. And that's the thing. Those who can't go to prison. So, you have no choice, right? You have no choice. It's like you either beat him up. It's either you beat him and join us or go to prison. And that's your options. I'm like, well, yep. Mm-hmm. And they're all looking at each other like, what do we do? And Hanji says, this is ridiculous. This is enough. And they hold Hanji back. And Keith says, no. No matter how many of these tots there are, they're no match for me. Keith's trying to hold him up. And then they decide to do it. And I love that it cuts from them holding their hands with resolve to it all like loosening and then being covered in blood. There's a lot of shot of hands in this episode, if you notice. There are a lot of shot of hands. Hands are pretty frequent in this. There's a shot of Aaron's hands on the table that are open with a cut going through it. Like he's the one with the control in the situation. He has the spirit stick. Then you have Armin and Mikasa who are forced to have their hands down the table. Then you have all the hands grabbing towards the wine bottle. And then from one hand to another. And then you have in this, the hands gripped to their side, the hands devoting your heart, and then you have the hands covered in blood. Like there's a lot of hand symbolism in this, you know. And then they beat Keith till he couldn't stand anymore. And he says, well done, we're delighted to welcome you all. And they're all just standing around him, all of them. And then he looks at Hanji and says, now could you guide us to where Zeke's being held? And I want to cut that look on his face. That look. Oh my God. I want to pause it right there. Oh my God. I want to grab it right there. That little shit. It's been brought to my attention too in the Discord. It was brought to my attention that originally in the manga, I've not asked for manga spoilers because I am eventually going to read the manga, but someone just casually mentioned it in the Discord last night that Flock originally was supposed to have blonde hair. The fudge? What? And I'll show you guys a picture of what that's supposed to look like. No! I love Flock's iconic red hair. I love that he has red hair. And it fits his character perfectly. I love it. It makes him distinct. And I'm like, there's enough blondes in this. I think through the Discord, there's like a dozen blondes in this series that you can name right off the bat. I'm like, there's enough blonde characters in this series. We need another redhead. So, no, I'm glad Flock's redheaded. But I can't believe he was originally blonde. No, thank you. But, God, that look he gives Hanji. Hanji's just like so disgusting. I feel like Hanji's going to be the one to bring Flock down. I feel like if Flock goes down, Hanji's going to be the one to do it. Because they've set up so much stuff with Flock and Hanji in these last 2 episodes. The idea of Flock taking over the military and Flock basically taking over at least Hanji's position with the cadets. I feel like it's just setting up for Hanji and Flock to have a confrontation. And I just want Hanji to punch him as hard as she can. But yeah, Flock walking away and looking back and saying, Commander Hanji, let's go. And Hanji, it's funny, we noted back in season 3 that Hanji was mad at Keith for being a bystander and all this, but I feel like Hanji in this moment is showing some respect to Keith, being like, damn, you stood your ground and you stood for your beliefs and it got the shit beat out of you, but you didn't run from your morals. God. And so then we cut down to the cellar where everybody's at. Armin, because he's a Titan shifter, can heal himself. So Armin's totally healed up. Totally fine there. And we see Jean. Jean has his hand up against the wall like he's super pissed off. Jean's like, I can't believe that horse face doppelganger of mine. Jean's pissed off. Armin looks kind of sad, but he looks a little numb to the situation, but he doesn't look angry, and I think that's important. I think Armin doesn't look angry. He just looks sad and disappointed. And then we have the Browse family there. And Connie is looking over, and I don't know who Armin's looking at. Connie is, there's Mikasa, right? Yeah. Connie has his arms crossed, like he's just really pissed off. He's like completely lost faith in Eren. And I thought that was Sanji at first. Sasha took off the scarf. Sasha took the scarf off. Damn it. I thought it was Hanji for a second in the cell because their back was to us, but Hanji took off the scarf. Well, that just broke my heart in 1,000 pieces. Because that was her representation of her love for Eren. And she's like, screw it. Oh my God. And then we cut, it's like Mikasa looking towards Eren, and Eren looks back towards them, but there's a shadow cast under Eren, which I think there's a shadow under him, right? And he's looking out that same window. If you go back to the end credits of season 3, there's Eren looking out that same window, only he's in the Survey Corps garb, and it's clearly from like 3 years prior, but Eren's looking out the window sitting on the ledge. And he just looks sad. He just looks sad. He doesn't look happy. He doesn't look pleased. He doesn't look angry. He just looks numb and sad. And that's why I'm hoping that look on his face, like he didn't want to have to do this. But that's why I'm hoping that this is all just part of an act. But I don't know. We don't know enough. And I feel like until we see the next episode, I'm not going to know enough. But, he just looks sad. And then we cut to Zeke focusing in on Levi, which clearly Zeke is nearsighted because he does pull Levi into focus. And he's just slowly growing himself back. But God, Levi, those torture methods against Sonus back in season 3, Levi was clearly holding back because he's like, are you awake? Yeah. And he's like, don't move. Oh my God, there's a wire across your neck attached to the Thunder Spear's fuse. You squirm too much and you'll be blown in half or worse. And was this the fan service of Zeke we were asking for? No. Maybe somebody's sick fetish, sure. But God, Levi. He's like, pull your pants on and sit here. Because they're like barely on, right? And Zeke just being like, just puking, like just sitting there, and he just, and it's like in his side, like he just pukes. And Levi's like, I bet you wish you were dead right now. And they're in a wagon like somewhere out on the trail. Not that I sympathize. You toyed with the lives of my comrades. And he's like, tell me, was whimpering while covered in shit part of your master plan? Oh my God. Oh, and he chops his feet off. Oh, he tortures him. He's like, shut up. Unless I slice you to bits, you'll turn into a Titan again. Even though there's no chance of him turning into a Titan right now, he's still healing. Levi's like, I'm going to keep chopping you up so it just takes you longer. Oh my God. And he's just torturing him. Yep. And then that's when Zeke asks where his glasses are. Where are my glasses? And Levi's like, well, the hell I know. Who cares? You won't be needing them anymore. And he's just like, nope. Mm-mm. And that's when Zeke's like, damn it. And that's when we get that's what triggers the flashback. And we get, nice one, Zeke. You're getting real good at throwing. And him as a kid, as a warrior candidate. But this guy has, okay, so this guy, he's the former Beast Titan. Okay, I bet he's the former Beast Titan. He has a sleeve on as well. Okay, so this guy, you can see in the sunlight, he has a red band on, which means he's a warrior. I bet he's the former Beast Titan, and he gives the glasses to Zeke. So Zeke's gonna inherit his memories. Okay. And him teaching, which again, we're gonna talk about. Eren gives Armin shit for inheriting Bertolt's memories, but Zeke has inherited this man's memories. This man clearly liked baseball because he's playing it with Zeke. So is Zeke's love of baseball really because Zeke likes baseball, or is it because the man liked baseball too? Like, what? You can tell I'm very frustrated by that line of logic. Ever thought about playing baseball? I can't, Mr. Casaver. Casaver. Okay. And then we have Casaver. Okay. I can't play catch. It says I can't play Mr. Casaver. I have a mission. Okay, and then we show Zeke with the little blush. Okay. So the question is, does he have the mission because of Mr. Casaver, or did he have the mission before Mr. Casaver? Or was this... Because he was like a really little kid when he was kind of indoctrinated by Grisha, so... God, oh my God. So yeah, okay, all right. So and we're gonna get Zeke backstory finally next episode. Finally, thank God. I've waited all season. I waited 15 episodes for this, and y'all have been very nice and very patient and been like, we'll save our thoughts for Zeke until later. And I'm like, okay. And I'm glad you all have said that. I really am. But I'm glad we're finally getting to that moment. So here's the thing. Let's break down this whole thing about Zeke and Eren's plan, because I'm trying to theorize what the possibilities are with this plan. Levi's like, screw all of this. Screw all y'all. He's like, everything's compromised. Forget it. I'm just doing what I want to now. I honestly think that Levi might be the most free character in this series right now, because he's not really tied down to anything. He's just like, I think, but again, he's wanting to save, he wants somebody to eat Zeke. It's just like, can Ackermans become Titan shifters? What does that do about the whole here's a question. What would that do with the Ackerman bond? If they are tied to something and they were Titan shifters, does that really impact it? I don't know. So, okay. So, again, me trying to rationalize Eren's choices, trying to be neutral, trying to say this is all an act that Eren is putting on, right? Because we're seeing Eren looking forlorn and numb and depressed. So, and we go back to that line that in order to save Armin and Mikasa, you have to follow through with this. So, it's just really hard of what Eren has to do, right? So, if we go back to Eren, okay? So, all right. So Eren hates the idea of slavery. He hates not being free. And he hates the fact that the two people closest to him, he hates the fact that Armin and Mikasa are tied to this slavery. Okay? By the blood, by the power of the Titans. By either the power of the Titans or the Ackermans, which technically the Ackermans are tied to the power of the Titans because of what they're intended to do by the royal family. So he hates that he's tied to the slavery that's the power of the Titans. Pot, if you will. They're influenced by pot, and it's not good. So he hates that, right? And so Eren wants to be free to make his own choices and not be influenced by anything. Okay. And he says he's not influenced by Zeke. He says he's not, but Zeke and him have a conversation. So, again, whatevs. But I'm like, in the back of my head, I'm like, are you not influenced by Grisha? Can you really say that? Can you really say that you're not influenced by him at all? Okay, sure. You're gonna say Armin's influenced by Bertolt, but you're not influenced by Grisha. Okay, you're free. We'll go with it. We'll just avoid that possible hypocrisy. We'll just go with it. But again, is his whole thing that he has to lie to Armin and Mikasa to save them? Okay? To keep them away. Is he making them leave him and get away from him, and so he has to lie? As Pixa said, within every lie there's an ounce of truth. What he said wasn't wrong. That, yeah, maybe Armin is influenced by the memories of Bertolt a little bit. I still question the whole thing with Annie and question that based on season 1. Whatever. But obviously, I do agree that Mikasa is influenced by the blood of the Ackermans. I do agree with that. Now, whether or not, what I get mad at is when Eren says that her whole identity is just the blood itself and that she has no input into it. I'm like, okay, sure. Well, but I'm assuming, is he just lying? Is this all just a show? Okay? Is it all just a show, an act, a play within a play? Because you could argue that how he was with Reiner was just part of the act as well. So, okay. What we don't know is this master plan. That is still what is under wraps that we don't know. And that Zeke says that it just Zeke and Eren are the only ones that can do it. And I'm guessing that that's tied to the fact of the Founder Titan. And the only way to do the rumbling is through Eren and Zeke. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. That they're the only ones that can reshape the world because they're the ones that can activate the rumbling. Okay, fine. Makes sense. I'm totally in agreement with that. That's your option there. But here's all the things that go with that plan that I have questions about. And these are just questions. I don't want to be spoiled, but as we're going into episode 15, I have questions. What is the rumbling targeting? Okay? Is it just Marley? Is it the world? Is it everyone? Is there this whole nihilistic thing is like, well, the only way to stop the cycle of violence is if the only way to stop the wheel is that we just destroy it. We just destroy the wheel. Okay? And the only way to destroy the wheel is if we just kill everybody. If everybody just dies and the world just starts over again somehow, it'll be fine. You know? Here's the thing about it. Here's the thing about it all, right? You could look at it two ways. You could destroy Marley, but you can't stop there if you do that, right? You can't stop with just Marley if you do that, because then some other country is going to take Marley's place. The cycle's going to keep going. So you destroy the world, and then it's just Eldia. But as I've said, Willie noted that, and Erwin noted, everybody's noted that Willie specifically said that during the Titan War, the other countries were being assimilated, and eventually, when they ran out of enemies, the Eldians just started attacking each other and started dividing and forming different houses. So the cycle of violence just continued anyway. The violence just beget violence, and that's all that came of it, right? There was no diplomacy. And so, then what do we do? Is that freedom? What is that? So there's that option. Or do you use the rumbling to destroy everyone, the whole world? Is Eren viewing death as freedom? That's what I'm afraid of, is that Eren's like, well, I'll be truly free when I get to make my own choices, and if I choose to kill myself and destroy the world, then it's my choice and I'm free, and that's my freedom. I'm like, that's problematic. That's genocide. No. So do we destroy everyone? And is Zeke like, I got a year left, YOLO, don't care, and if this destroys the cycle of violence, that's fine. But I feel like in the little corner over here, it's like, remember diplomacy? Remember the miracle? Remember rejecting nihilism? Remember when those were possibilities? This is not that. So I don't know. And again, I feel like I'm missing a big piece of the puzzle that's not been revealed to us, and I'm just going by what we know so far at this point in the series. So what we're saying, so we don't know what the rumbling is going to end with. What is going to be the end result, right? Flock thinks that we're just going to destroy our enemies, whatever that entails, and I think Flock believes that it's just going to be Eldia left. I think Flock thinks that we're just going to be left with Eldia. We'll destroy our enemies using the rumbling, and then we'll have a new Eldian empire like we did, in the past 2,000 years ago starting. And then we'll just start back from square one. Only this time it'll be different somehow, right? Whereas I think Armin and Hanji, in their minds, the scientist and the idealist there, and the peacekeeper there, they're thinking, if we destroy the rest of the world, there's nothing left to discover, right? They're thinking, if we destroy the rest of the world and it's just Eldia, there's no discovery. Armin's whole thing back in episode 9 was that he was learning about new cultures and new ideologies, and he was like, this is fascinating, and we get to learn other people's viewpoints and perspectives, and it enriches our lives and makes us better. And I'm going to go to a comment here in a little bit and talk about that. But he's like, if we destroy the world, there's none of that left. So what's there to discover? What new freedoms are there to find? And Aaron believes that there really isn't any new freedoms beyond the sea. It's like, no, there's just more walls, more prisons. And Armin views things differently. And I think Hanji, from a scientist perspective, is kind of on board with Armin. Like, where's the other technology and cultures we could learn and cultivate and, inspire us? Where's the inspirations, right? So that's a question too. Another question is, where does the whole wine and the pure titans fit in at, right? Because if you have the rumbling, why do you need more pure titans? Unless it's just to get the military police out of the way. It's just to get to destroy our enemies, right? To destroy our enemies, we'll turn them into pure titans, and that'll solve that problem. It's like, so then my question is, in all of this, what is Aaron and Zeke planning on doing with Armin and the others? Because Aaron made the statement that they were just going to take Armin. He told Armin and Mikasa that they weren't going to harm Hanji and them. They were just moving them somewhere else. I'm like, okay, well then what are you going to do with them? Are you just going to lock them up in their own cage and let them sit it out while you go destroy the rest of the world, and then you're going to come back and set them free and be like, look, we did it? How does that work? What is that? What are you going to do with them? Are you just going to lock them up? You talk about saying you hate slavery, but you're enslaving them if you do that. You're becoming what you say you hate. Why? It's just like, no! That's stupid! No, it's not stupid. I feel like I'm missing pieces of the puzzle, and I have a feeling in the next episode it's all going to come, there's going to be more pieces revealed. I want to know what the specifics of Zeke's plan is. He says what his true intentions are. Like, what is the point of all this? Maybe Zeke has learned that there's some way to stop the power of the Titans, to end the power of the Titans that won't result in everybody's death. Maybe that's it. Okay. Maybe we find a way to stop. There's some special way to stop the founder of the Titans' powers, or to stop the power of the Titans from going to the next generation. There's some special way to stop it, and that's what they're trying to do. And then that way, maybe there's a way to stop the founding Titans' powers from existing. I don't know, but we've not been privy to that information yet. But maybe we'll find it out next episode. But it's just, God, I don't know enough. Again, I feel like there's pieces of the puzzle missing. I want to say this is all just an elaborate act, that Aaron is acting like this because it's part of the plan and he has to go through with it in order to save everybody. And the worst part is, if that's true, then that makes me feel better about Aaron's character, but it is also heartbreaking, because that means Aaron's had to turn on his best friends, the people he cares about the most. He's had to turn on them to save them. And the thing of it is, if he saves them, will that trust ever be fully restored? That's the problem. Even if he saves them, even if this plan works and he saves them all, he's said so many cruel things to them. Things won't go back to the way that they once were. I don't think that they will. And I'm like, was it worth it? You know, one of those scenarios. I don't know. This is a story, such a tragedy, and it's like seeing all these beautiful pieces getting built up in season 3 just come crashing down around us. Like Bystander and Friends were 2 of my favorite episodes, and they were such hopeful episodes. Like Friends was sad, but the message behind it was so hopeful. And I feel like Isayama presented that with us, being like, here's a possibility. It was a possibility, but all these factors are rejecting it. And this is what we should not do. It's like, we shouldn't get to this point. I feel like Isayama's message. I feel like Isayama's like, how about we not get to this point where this is the only option we have? Because see how bad this is? But yeah, so I've got a few more comments I want to go through. But this episode made me numb. I feel as numb as Aaron, and and I'm trying to be neutral, and I'll try to be neutral to Flock. What he did to Keith was awful, was cruel. I just hope karma exists for Flock, because that was, and there's truth in what Flock was saying. I won't deny that. I was just, damn, what did Keith do to deserve this? What did Keith do to deserve that, right? Damn it. I feel like Surma is going to be an interesting character in all this. That's going to be interesting to see. And then Levi, God, oh my God. So yeah, so the comments I have left, I do want to note this. Sacha Purvis also pointed out the idea of McGath choosing his table of top officials. I hadn't thought about that back in episode 11. The idea that McGath, he really did choose his officials. McGath is an interesting character. We haven't seen him in a while, but he's an interesting character. I've really come to appreciate his character a lot in this series. And it's interesting that McGath seemed like he always sympathized with the warrior candidates. Like he put on a front, but he did sympathize with them a great deal. And I think that's the most telling, in that at the end of episode 11 in the end credits, when McGath reshapes his council, there are no Marleyans at the table. None. No Marleyans. It is just the warrior candidate. It's just the warriors. Like the people that he's grown up with and cares about. That's it. And see, that's the funny thing about all this. The funny thing is we have the enemy. And the enemy with McGath, if you compare McGath and Aaron and Zeke, and this is just a comparison, just a blind surface level comparison, and you can break it down in so many different ways. I'm predicting the comment section as I say this. But you can break it down in a lot of different ways, but on a surface level, you have McGath, who chooses in his council for a counterattack to bring in the people he's closest to and trusts them. And he lets them have an input and a say. So if you compared Zeke and Aaron as leaders versus McGath brings together this group of individuals who, here's the thing, the group of individuals have more power than him. McGath is only mortal. He doesn't have the power of the Titans. He's only mortal. So he brings in people he trusts that has power, that respect him, and they do respect McGath, and they listen to McGath, and they have a dialogue, and they challenge McGath's viewpoints, and Reiner brings up, he's like, no, we need to do it this way, and they give reasons for it, and they have a conversation and a dialogue, and in the end they decide to go, and they're still there. We haven't even accounted for the fact that Reiner and co are on the island, and I don't know if Zeke and Aaron know about it. I don't think they do. I said last episode, God, it's hitting me now. I said last episode that I didn't know if Aaron knew they were there, and that's why he cut his hand. He cut his hand so that he was threatening them to where they wouldn't do anything. But I thought maybe Aaron predicted that Reiner and co might be there. No, I don't think so anymore. I think Aaron was just doing that to prove a point of, don't mess with me right now. Let me speak and be in charge of the situation. Reiner and them are there. They're assessing the situation. They could pop up within the next 2 episodes. I don't think they'll show up the next episode, because I think we're going to get Zeke's backstory. But the finale, and nobody's prepared. Again, Keith was like, there's Titans within the walls. Peek and co are there. Cadets, you might need to know how to cut that nape. It might come in handy if there's a Titan shifter around. Oh, God, Keith, I love you. But yeah, we haven't even considered them in the whole equation. I don't think Zeke and Aaron are considering them in the equation, that they're there already. But my point is that Reiner and them, they all came together and had a dialogue, talked about the counterattack, and they worked cohesively. There was synergy there, and they've gone back as a unit. Now, whether or not they'll be successful, that is to be seen. But they did move cohesively. Whereas you have, on parody, Aaron and Reiner are not bringing Armin and Mikasa and the others to the table. They're not. They're intentionally leaving them out. And you can argue that Aaron's doing this because he doesn't want Armin and Mikasa to die. But I'm like, then what are you going to do? Lock them up in a basement for the rest of this while you get your rumbling done? Is that what you're going to do? It's a totally different dynamic. On a surface level, Aaron and Zeke are acting alone. And they're moving the chess pieces how they want to, but the chess pieces have no say in the matter. Flock and them are doing exactly what Aaron and Zeke tell them to do. Aaron is not letting Armin and Mikasa act on their own. He's putting them in a place and keeping them there. He's putting Hanji in a place and keeping them there. And you can argue that he's doing that to protect them. But then, how is that? So are you going to be the only one free, Aaron? What? How is that any different than what King Fritz did? How is that any different? If you're just going to lock away your friends, the people you care about, in a room until it's like King Fritz, but it's not. It's like King Fritz in the fact that you're locking them away and not letting them act. But then in Fritz's case, he didn't act out against anybody outside the walls. He just hid there as well. He hunkered down with the other people inside the walls and just waited for an attack to happen. And just waited it out and was like, well, it'll eventually implode and we'll just deal with it when we deal with it. I really don't like Carl Fritz in this scenario. I'm sure we'll get more on him maybe in part 2, but I don't think we're going to get to it in part 1. I think we only got 2 episodes left. I don't think it's going to happen. I think in part 2 we'll probably get more on Carl Fritz. I hope. But I don't like his character right now because I'm thinking back on all that scenario of we're just going to sit here and wait for it to implode. And it has. And now you're dealing with ramifications of that. So, but on the same vein, it's like Aaron and Zeke moving on their own. It's kind of like an antithesis of the war council McGath just put together, I guess is my point in all of this. But it's interesting. And so then, Sasha also noted that Gabby in episode 11 at 16 minutes and 10 seconds, and I'm going to have to go test this out. I haven't gotten a chance to test it out yet, but I'm going to. At 16 minutes and 10 seconds, Gabby has the pitchfork and is about to lunge at Kaya. At 16 minutes and 10 seconds in episode 11. In season 1, episode 6, at 16 minutes and 10 seconds, Aaron has the spear and is about to lunge at Mikasa's kidnappers. What? and a part of me too is wondering if Aaron is understanding that he stole, if Aaron is partially responsible for Mikasa's enslavement. I wonder if that's crossed his mind, because if you think about it, Aaron gave the order to fight. Aaron had no clue what he was doing. He didn't know about the Ackerman blood. He didn't know about any of that, right? But he did tell her to fight. He did give the sounding alarm, right? And triggered it. So is Aaron conscious that he's essentially responsible inadvertently for that happening? Again, that's tying to the fact that Aaron says he's free. But I'm like, you are like the least free character in this entire series. You've been the least free character from the start because of all the stuff leading up to what's happened to you. But again, at the time that Aaron told that to Mikasa, he didn't have the power of the Attack Titan or anything. It was just Aaron's character, which is interesting. Because yeah, when he told Mikasa to fight, she did, but he didn't have the power of the Attack Titan at that time. So it's almost like it was destined to happen to Aaron, that he was destined to become the Attack Titan. Yep, so there's that. Interesting. And then a lot of people said that it's considered headcanon the horse that bit Gabby is Shallot, which is the horse that was eating the hair of the Survey Corps members back in season 1 and season 2. That's really cute. I like that. Also, horse is Japanese for Uma is horse in Japanese. And Akuma is devil. So maybe Jean likes Mikasa because you have Jean who's the horse face and it's Uma, and you have Mikasa who's the devil Ackerman, which is Akuma. Maybe like Ackerman, Akuma. So yeah, Levi approved like that name. Absolutely. Interesting. I don't know. It could also tie the fact that if Jean is connected to a horse motif, him and Peak being a possible thing. She's the cart. Don't know. But, and then both Sasha and Roy Reviewer noted that episode 11's title is Deceiver, but the chapters that it covers, one of the chapters is called Guides. And then in episode 12, it's called Guides, but one of the chapters is called Deceiver or Counterfeit. So for some reason, the anime swapped the titles and called episode 11 Deceiver when it should have been Guides, and episode 12 Guides when it should have been Deceiver. And I'm like, was that intentional on the anime's part, or is it just a mishap? I don't know. I feel like both titles work for both episodes. Just, you can justify it either way. And then, yeah, so going back to this, Sean Dunn said that in Aaron in season 1, when he was fighting Annie, noted and said the phrase, and it's stuck with me, Sean, ever since season 1. That's when I started my Aaron conspiracy about him being an antagonistic character, saying, I will destroy the entire world. And there was an ellipses, and I am truly free. So again, that's kind of my thing. Is the plan for Aaron to destroy the whole world, and then he'll be free? But I'm like, that's not going to make you free. He thinks it will, but I'm like, I don't think it will. I don't think it's going to end that way. I don't think you're going to get the freedom that you want. Because I think that ties back to Kenny saying that everybody's a slave to something. That your freedom is not truly a possibility. You can be a slave to something and still live, but okay. I'm gonna wait till the recap to talk more about this. I feel like I need those other 2 episodes before I can speak more. I feel like I need it. Al Sora noted that that Armin does know Aaron best, but he feels like Aaron's betrayed him. Yep. I agree with that. I think Armin does know Aaron best, but he feels like the Aaron not confiding in him and Mikasa, and especially after this episode, I'm sure Armin feels betrayed. But again, Armin's reaction, he looked more sad and disappointed than angry. And I think that's important. I think it's important that Armin is by character. The most angry we've ever seen Armin is in this episode. That's the angriest we've ever seen him. Maybe that and when he was against Bertolt in Hero. But God, I feel like Armin's not usually a character that will get mad at somebody, just be disappointed. I think he got more mad at Aaron because he said those words to Mikasa, who they both care about. Christopher Peterson noted that the Azumabitos are connected kind of to Erwin in the idea that they were both selfish but also thinking of other people. And Christopher in his comment talks about how the Azumabitos, when they have that conversation with Mikasa back in episode 12, they note that they are concerned with capitalism and gaining wealth and helping themselves, but they also cared about Mikasa too. They're like, we care about you, we feel for you, but we also, are looking out for our own skins as well. And I like that comparison to Erwin. That's interesting in that Erwin was a bit selfish. Erwin's like, I have my own ambition. I want to find out the truth and prove my father right. But at the same time, he framed it in a way that it was helping humanity. And I think for a while, those two were aligning themselves, and then towards the end of Erwin's life, those two things started to drift apart, and he was stuck with the slavery idea of him chasing after the truth instead of helping out his fellow man. So interesting. But yeah, and I think you could tie Aaron to that too, in a sense, right? I think Aaron can get tied to that too. Aaron says he's truly free. He's not a slave, and that when the world's all destroyed, he'll truly be free. But I'm like, I'm kind of with Armin. I'm like, are you truly free? I don't know. Kittens and rainbows. That's going to be my mantra from here on in. And then I have one more thing to talk about, and that is Mark. I think that's all I've got left to talk about in here. That is Mark Luzon's comment on episode 9, and I want to pull it up here. It was a long comment, Mark, but I really liked this from episode 9, and so the idea, your thought process on Armin and Aaron, and I want to read this out loud. So Mark says, let's start with Armin. Over the course of the episode, Armin, and this is episode 9, Armin has become enamored with the idea of diplomacy, of making friends with foreign soldiers, setting aside old prejudices, and beginning to trust one another. These people, Armin is discovering, are both different from what he knows and the same. They eat different foods, they share a love of cooking, they build different machines, but both revel in the idea of science and mechanics. As Anyan Kapan said, there are many different people and that makes things more interesting. And that, he says, is true freedom. The freedom to discover new things from others who aren't exactly like you and endlessly expand your world. And Armin is loath to destroy that freedom, the way he's begun to see it. There must be a way, he thinks, a way to make the rest of the world accept us rather than fear us, a way for us all to benefit. We just need time to try to make them understand. And I agree with that fully. That's been my whole thing. Armin is just like, their diplomacy is possible, and I think Falco's seen that too with Sasha and Nicolo's example. Like, diplomacy and coexistence is possible. The problem is that you need time. You need time and understanding. And that's two things that Eren, I don't think, believes they have. And so he says, now back to Eren. As Armin and Mikasa allow themselves to get swept up in the fun of the damn harbor project and the wonder of learning new things from other people with this new knowledge and viewpoints, Eren has been watching. Armin looks at the foreign soldiers and sees people like Nicolo who are willing to give the Eldians a chance. Eren looks at the foreign soldiers and sees those who still glare at them with hateful eyes. The world, Eren says, thinks of them as monsters. There is no misunderstanding there. If they do not act, demonstrate the power of the Eldian people, they'll be crushed. There's no time for diplomacy that may not even work. The only way to obtain freedom, Eren says, is to fight. If you don't fight, you can't win. If you can't win, someone will steal your freedom away from you. Freedom is only obtained by triumph. Sitting on your laurels, drinking tea, and playing nicey nice won't get you anywhere. So Eren will move forward, whether or not his comrades want him to, no matter how many people stand in his way, which is in line with Eren's core principles, which leads us to quite a conundrum on our hands. Yup! I believe that. I do think that Eren is very set in his ways. His core principles are like fighting. I like the idea you said of freedom is obtained by triumph, by victory, by fighting and winning is how you gain freedom. Sure. Sure it is. I know. But then I don't think Eren's wrong, but I don't think Armin's wrong either. It's like, what do you destroy through that triumph, right? By winning and destroying the world, what are you destroying? What is the cost? And is the cost worth it? And that's the conundrum, right? Eren thinks the cost is worth it. Yeah, these people are going to die, but we're going to become free through their deaths. And Armin's like, is their death worth it? If we destroy them, is that truly us being free? Because for Armin, that freedom is different. Freedom isn't not being hindered by anyone. It's by accepting those challenges and meeting them in kind and figuring out a way for them all to benefit. Eren's like, we're going to benefit. And Armin's like, but can't we all benefit? And again, time is the issue. And that's the biggest fault I have with Armin's logic is and a lot of you have commented, Eren's like, I've waited and no one's brought anything to the table. And that's the problem. Eren's like, I've sat around and waited for years and no one can think of something to do. So we have to act. And so if this is the only way I can do it, so be it. And I get it. I do. I get that rationale. And Armin's logic is flawed because where do you start? What do you say? Like Yelena told them, he's like, you guys were infants to the world. Again, thanks to Carl Fritz. They don't know how to interact with the world, and that's the biggest problem. But the thing is that the miracle has already happened again, and Falco saw that with Nicolo and Sasha. The miracle has already happened. Two people that were from two different sides fighting each other to the death came together and loved. And it's so frustrating that Eren's just... And again, going back to that episode 9 and 10, all those scenes where they were with Nicolo and all them, Eren wasn't present for. He wasn't in any of those scenes. The scene where Anya and Kapan's telling them about religion and things like that, Eren wasn't present for. Nicolo and the food, Eren wasn't present for. He was off by himself. And so I feel like that's such a sad thing, right? It's very sad because Eren missed all those opportunities. The conversation that Armin's had with Gabby, the Mr. Browse's conversation, Eren was not there for it. He wasn't there for Mr. Browse's whole moving speech about shouldering the burdens. And I think Eren is shouldering the burden. I do think Eren is, if anything, with Mr. Browse's words, he is shouldering the burden, but he's doing it alone. And it's frustrating. But again, I'm only speaking by what I know in episode 14 of season 4, part 1. We still have 2 more episodes this season, And we still have an entire part 2 that I'm sure in no way, shape, or form will complicate what I've spent the last 2.5 hours talking about. I'm sure it won't complicate it at all. Nah, won't complicate it at all. God. So yeah, here's where I'm at. I want to believe that he's got a plan. I'm trusting Isayama on this. I'm trusting Isayama that he knows what he's doing and that this is all going to tie back around, that we're going to get some big revelations. I don't want to be spoiled, but I'm just going to keep an open mind the best I can. But God, this episode was hard. Levi was surprisingly the levity in it. When Levi slaughtering Titans and attacking Zeke is the levity, I was too hyped up to get ice cream out. No way. So we'll see. But I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. I'm sure that by next episode, this will all change again, but what can you do? So in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with episode 15 of season 4, part 1 of Attack on Titan. Bye.